hi. Hi, hi, hi. Low, low, low. Hi, hi, hi. Low, low, low. Ah. Hype. We're building hype. Getting hyped. Hi, 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 hi. High voice, my high voice is here. No voice is there and you never need to wear. I said after woman. let's see if I can actually follow along for a couple of these verses here. Over King, over King, over King, over King, over King, Alexonius Varin, Adan Mohum Asval, Akvenor Akpalgran Honost Honsin Rosan, Dovakin Vahikogan Mujai. Hello. Hello and welcome to the Super Bunny Hop Free Stream Friday Beowulf dramatic reading. We're about to go through the fabulous Maria Dvana Headley translation, which deliberately tries to stick to a style of overcompensating, masculine, perhaps insecure in their masculinity, braggarts at the bar, swigging Bud Light and sharing stories that can't possibly be true about how buff and manly they are. This is going to be great, and I see that we have a grand total of 11 people in here, and that's how you know it's going to be great, because I am investing genuine amounts of passion and pain into something that evidently is a niche that is definitely not appealing to the lowest common denominator here. We are about to have, unlike your usual video game entertainment time, an hour of real culture again, similar to the Gilgamesh stream. We are going to be, I'm jealous of the sunlight's raining down here in Orlando. It's been raining all week in Atlanta. I'm trying not to think about it, and we'll actually be bringing that up again at the end, because I don't want it to weigh on my mind, because there's an issue related to that rain that is a bit important to me. But anyways, I gotta block that out and immerse myself into the performance mindset, where we are going to be having a cultural experience here, where we will be able to trace the influences and history behind some of our favorite pop cultural video game and art experiences. In this case, Beowulf obviously carries heavy inspiration into a sort of modern fantasy reimagining of Norse mythology that bled into Skyrim. It made its way there by Lord of the Rings. Just as Homer is an obsessive object of fascination and passion for myself, it was the Beowulf author that hooked Tolkien and dramatically changed the traditional Western storytelling traditions in this continuity that has Beowulf definitely being an important dot on the same timeline that is shared by Homer and the Iliad, that at some point thousands of years later ends, or at least is being continued on in the modern day, with stuff like Metal Gear Solid and Skyrim and Lord of the Rings and all the Dungeons and Dragons derivative fantasy works that have come forth. So for fair disclaimer, I'm not as much a Beowulf expert as I have been a Homer expert, for sure. I think at this point I might want to confidently claim that I might actually be something of a Homer expert, but definitely not a Beowulf expert. In fact, I might even know more about the Epic of Gilgamesh than I do Beowulf. I read Beowulf in high school, genuinely enjoyed, but I do not remember what translation it was, nor did I know what the point of poetry was back then. That's something very different in my brain that this Maria Dvana Headley translation in particular is going to tap into in a beautiful way. I read through this halfway and then stopped there because I kind of want to save the especially dramatic stuff regarding the dragon at the end for an on-screen, reactive, improvised performance as I go through. I'm gonna be hit by some plot twists and emotionally intense moments, probably about as well as you guys will. Except I'll be under pressure to to say it very dramatically and masculine and manly, with sometimes pauses happening. Sell the reaction of an important character, keep a musical beat. So, I am working on a Homer adaptation. I have already done a Gilgamesh one of these, and have had a Gilgamesh adaptation in the back burner, in the back of my mind, and scribbled down some ideas on paper for a couple years now. But this is going to be the first time I'm really dipping my toe into Beowulf for this phase of my life I'm entering into. And I wanted to point out that this is an important step of the evolution of the English language, which is kind of weird. It takes place in Scandinavia, mostly in Denmark, but I think in the third act he goes to Sweden. I don't know for sure. I'm going to find out alongside you guys. I'm going to refresh myself. Oh yeah, I also read Grendel in college. That was fun, but I don't think was as much of an important memory milestone long term as that high school Beowulf reading was. But yeah, Beowulf marks an important step in the evolution of the English language, going from Beowulf's Old English to Chaucer's Middle English, and branching English a bit farther off of the Germanic roots it's coming from. Beowulf nowadays, spoken in Old English to modern English listeners, sounds mildly unintelligible. It comes from a weird transitionary dynamic with how these Anglo-Saxons who were living in Scandinavia at the time and fascinated with Scandinavian mythology were invading the English Isles around the same century. And if I'm getting that history right, because I believe the Anglo-Saxon invasion is a multi-century long process that begins around 500, 600, ends around 1100. Beowulf is written around 900 to year 1000. And so the language is closer to Scandinavian Germanic languages, but every now and then, if you listen to a performance by such the probably actual handful of bards who still exist, such as Benjamin Bagby, you might hear him say, amidst all the incomprehensible gobbledygook, "Dat was een good koning." That was a good king. I don't think it takes much work to decipher what the original English of that phrase means. Like Homer, like any good epic mythology, Beowulf is going to be a story about exempla, about examples of what it means to be gut, and by association and by the power of age and history, quite ironically, what it means to be a good human existing on planet Earth in the incomprehensibly vast timeline of universal astronomical time and the collective human experience that stretches across millennia. You'll hear a lot about rings. You will hear a lot about powerful magical queens. And you'll hear names and places that will sound like they're from Lord of the Rings. Note how often that word rings comes up. Rings is going to come up a lot. And I was thinking of doing the Tolkien translation of Beowulf. I think Christopher Tolkien published it in 2013. But every now and then you find some people who are in Tolkien's inside circles and then had connections to it, those circles posthumously, claim that they were able to get a hold of this thing back in the 1930s to the 1960s. Now that it's in 2013, it was published to the masses. And as is all too familiar with the Christopher Tolkien publishing dynamic, you can kind of get an idea why. It's for Beowulf experts. The Tolkien Beowulf translation, I have tried. I gave it a shot. I couldn't do it. Maria Headley Devana, I folded into wonderfully elegantly. It is beautiful. The Tolkien translation of Beowulf instead is dry. It's for academic experts who aren't necessarily as interested in immersing themselves in an entertaining story as they are in noting the difference between his translation, the Old English, and then trying to postulate a more precise continuity of the evolution of the language. Tolkien's Beowulf is for language nerds. Maria Devana Headley's Beowulf is for a rollicking, good, fun, gory action-packed time. But remember, keep in the back of your mind that this is a spoken word oral story from a poet who is mostly doing it from memory. Um, it's not. I don't know if you should be visualizing a movie so much as is a cozy room in a snowy cabin or tavern in our own reality. Imagining the bard saying it is a really fun way to picture the Maria Devana Headley translation, when she sneaks in some modernisms every now and then that will match up the continuity of the bardic tradition with the modern Braggart tradition of insecure young men who are learning how to comprehend and utilize and cope with their masculinity, telling very exaggerated stories of fights and shouting matches and narrow escapes that they are probably exaggerating. So one language note I do have that Maria Devana Headley does not modernize is the word scop. In this context, scop is going to be bard. And I believe I did not have too much trouble adjusting to that. I don't think there's any other weird words that are going to show up, so much as there are going to be weird modernisms. The very first word of a piece of epic poetry is an important consideration for the translator or the performer. It's generally thought of in the tradition that the first word the translator or performer chooses is going to set the tone for the rest of the entire epic. And before I say that word, I want to set the tone with some ambiance. Like I mentioned earlier, try and visualize a shoddy little wooden building on a snowy hill. And inside of that building, let's put on a... Yeah, there we go. A nice cozy fire. But I think the wind is still too loud. We don't want it blowing our fire out. There we go. Now it's in the background. The wind and the snow is outside. The fire, the soup, and the ale, and a cozy room full of all your closest friends and families and neighbors who you have lived with your entire life and have followed through their lives from cradle to grave, are all gathering together for their evening's entertainment for about 4.5 hours. That's about an evening, right? We finished up work from the day. We might be heading into a Sunday here if we're allowed to stay up a little night and listen to the bard. The bard is going to give us 6 to 10 seconds of a cozy silence to further help set the mood. He's gonna raise his arm up to the ceiling and shout dramatically and very loudly, "Bro! Bro! Tell me we still don't know how to speak of kings. In the old days, everyone knew what men were. Brave, bold, glory-bound. Only stories now, but I'll sound the Spear-Dane song hoarded for hungry times. Their first father was a foundling, Skjald Skeffing. He spent his youth fists up, browbeating every bar-stool brother, bonfiring his enemies. That man began in the waves, a baby in a basket. But he bootstrapped his way into a kingdom, trading loneliness for luxury. Whether they thought kneeling necessary or no, everyone from head to tail of the Whale Road bent down. There's a king! There's his crown! That was a good king. Later, God sent Skjald a son, a wolf cub, further proof of manhood. Being God, he knew how the Spear-Danes had suffered, and the misery they'd mangled through. Leaderless, young years of loss, so the Life Lord, the almighty big boss, birthed them an Earthshaker. Biao's name kissed legions of lips by the time he was half grown, but his own father was still breathing. And we all know a boy can't daddy until his daddy's dead. The smart son gives gifts to his father's friends in peacetime, and then when war woos him, as war will, he'll need those troops to follow the leader. So privilege is the way men prime power, all the world over. Skjald was iron until the end. When he died, his warriors executed his final orders. They swaddled their king of rings and did just as the Dane had demanded, back when mind and meter could merge into a mouth. They bore him to the harbor and into the bosom of a ship, That father they'd followed, that man they'd adored. She was anchored and eager to embark, an ice maiden built to bear the weight of a prince. They laid him by the mast, packed tight in his treasure trove. Bright swords, war weeds, his lap holding a hoard, and flood tights, each fair coin placed by a loyal man. He who pays the piper calls the tune, his shroud shone ringed and runes sun-stitched. I've never heard of any ship so heavy, nor corpse so rich. Skjald came into the world unfavored, his men weighted him down as well as the strangers had, who'd once warped him to the swift. Even ghosts must be fitted to fight. The war band flew a golden flag over their main man. The salt sea saluted him, so too the storms. And Skjald's soldiers got drunk instead of crying. They mourned the way men do. No man knows, not me, not you, who hauled Skjald's horde to shore, but the poor are plentiful, and somebody got lucky. Finally, Beowulf rolled into righteous rule, daddying for decades after his own daddy died. At last, though, it was turn for erasure. His son, the half-Dane, run roughshod and smothering his father's story with his own. He rose in the realm and became a famous warlord, fighting ferociously dawn to dusk, fathering his own hold of Thor, heirs matching into the world in this order. Herogar, Hrothgar, Helga, and I heard he hand-clasped his daughter, her name's a blur, to Onella, Tinder. She rendered that battle Swede happy in fucking, where before he'd only been happy in fighting. War was the wife Hrothgar wed first, battles won, treasures taken. Admirers and kin heard his fight fortune and flanked him in force. Strong boys grew into stronger men, and when Hrothgar had an army, his hopes turned to a hall to home them, a house to espouse his faithful. More than just a mead hall, a world's wonder. 8th of 7. When it was done, he swore he'd load lighten, unhand everything he'd won. Worn and owned, passed to his posse all God's gifts, same lives and land. He'd keep the kingdom, of course, but he'd give far-reaching orders, carpets, carpentry, walls and gables, tables for seating a clan, rare gifts plated like rare meat, all for his men. And so up it rose, a greater hall than any other. Hrothgar filled it, blood brother by blood brother, and named it Heorot. His words were heard and heralded, and yes, bro, the man was more than just talk. He gave good gifts, his war-wedded war king's rings, and drank their leaders' mead. Nightly he feted his fight family with fortunes. The hall loomed, golden towers, antler-tipped. It was asking for burning, but that hadn't happened yet. You know how it is. Every castle wants invading, and every family has enemies born within it. Old grudges repudies. Speaking of grudges, out there in the dark, one waited. He listened, holding himself hard to home, but he'd been lonely too long, brotherless, sludge-stranded. Now he heard and endured the din of drinkers. Their poetry poisoned his peace. Every night turmoil, raucous laughter from Heorot, howling of harps, squawking of scups, men recounting the history of men like them. The Almighty made earth for us, they sang, sun and moon for our delight, fins full of creatures for our feasting, mares to quench our thirst. Heorot's hall dwellers caroused by candlelight, stumbling to sleep with the sunrise replete, lambs bleating comfort, ease pleased, until the night wakefulness moved their watcher to wrath. Grendel was the name of this woe-walker, unlucky, fucked by fate. He'd been living rough for years, ruling the wild, the mare, the fen, the fastness, his kingdom. His creation was cursed under the line of Cain, the kin-killer. The Lord long ago had taken Abel's side, though none of that was Grendel's doing. He'd descended from bloodstains. From Cain had come a cruel kind, seen by some as shadow-stalked monsters, elves, giants who'd ground against God, and for that been banished. Under a new moon, Grendel set out to see what horde haunted this hall. He found the ring-danes drunk, douse-downed, making beds of their benches. They were mead-medicated, untroubled by pain, their sleep untainted by sorrow. Grendel hurt, and so he hunted. The stranger taught the Danes about time. He struck, seized 30 dreaming men, and hied himself away home, bludgeoning his burden as he bounded, for the Danes had slipped sweetly in a world that had woken him, benefited from bounty even as they'd broken him. And when gold teeth tasted the sky, Grendel's silent skill was seen. His kills, grim crimson, spilt on banquet boards. The war horde wailed at the spoiling of their sleep. At the depths they dived in darkness while their enemy ate. A mournful morning. Their leader sat at his plate, old, overnight, impotent at this ingress. The band tracked the invader, but not to his lair. They had prayers to call out and pains to bear, and Grendel did not stay himself from slaughter. The next night, a second slaying, and then another, his rope played out and rotted through. A course plotted without mercy, and of course after course cold in his keep. Bro, it was easy after that to count the weepers. Men fleeing to cots after that beneath the king's wings. You'd have to been a fool to miss the malice of this hell-dweller, now hall-dwelling. Those who lived left, or locked themselves in the ladies' lodgings far from fault lines. And those who stayed, slain. For 12 snow seasons Grendel reigned over evening. Hrothgar suffered, Heorot buffeted, no hero to hold it. Every outsider talked shit, telling of legends and losses. Hrothgar's hall became a morgue, dark marks on floorboards. No songs, no scop, no searing meat, no blazing fire. And Grendel, incomplete, raided relentlessly. Dude, this was what they call a blood feud. A war that tore a hole through the hearts of the Danes. Grendel was broken and would not brook peace, diced in dueling deaths or dire himself. He had no youth for stealth, he came near nightly, and never negotiated. The old counselors knew better than to expect a settlement in silver from him. Ringless, Grendel's fingers, kingless, Grendel's country. Be it wizened vizier or beardless boy, he hunted them across foggy moors, an owl misdriving for mice, grist grinding their tails in his teeth. A Hellion's home is anywhere good for men to tread. Who knows the dread this marauder mapped? Grendel, enemy to everyone, waged his war without an army. Lonesome as he lapped the luxurious lengths of Heorot. His howl haunted the hall at night, the gold gifter's tongue throwing shade at him, his soul burning with dark flame. He couldn't touch the treasure or tame his yearning, for he'd been spurned by God. Times were hard for the Prince of Skaldings. Heart shattered, battered spirits spent. Men came to advise, bringing pithy plots and plans to arrest Hrothgar's awful guest. They bent themselves to idols and offered up their own spells, that a soul sayer might suddenly show up and save them. That was their nature, these heathens, hoping at the wrong heavens. They remembered hell, but nothing else. They knew no true Lord God, no master. They too were cursed, yet thought themselves clear. Bro, they were fucked. In times of worst woe, throwing themselves on luck rather than on faith, fire walkers swearing their feet uncharred while smoke stepping. Why not face the boss? And at death seek salves, not scars. So it went for years, the hell-sent raider harrowing the half-Dane son who sat in silence, brooding over unhatched hopes, while in the dark his people shuddered, salt scourged by weeping, by nights spent waping instead of sleeping. News went global. In Geatlan, Higelax's right-hand man heard about Grendel. Bro, here was a warrior like no other, massive, mighty, born of noble blood. He called for a ship to be readied for his band and boasted he'd try his teeth on this tale. Sail in as a savior over the Swan Road, seek that king and lend a hand as a defender. His elders understood this quest, and though he was dear to them, they knew better than to spear him with speeches. They augured their omens, ooh, and ushered him onward. He found 14 fists for hire, the boldest men of the Geats, and enlisted them as fighters. He, as the captain, went aboard to pilot a vessel with sea skills through keen currents and mean depths. Soon it was time to depart. The boat's belly was wet, and beneath the landlocks those warriors met, cheering, bringing battle gear into her bosom. As sand spit and surf sang, they pushed off and sent themselves to sea, made men. The wind sent them surging with the foam-feathered throat. Their bird flew free, sailing with certainty over salt waters. On the second day she shot ashore, and the men saw cliffs, crags uplifting from the ocean, the end of the voyage. Overboard the Geats leapt, shifting from sailors to soldiers, the moment their shoals touched solid earth. Their weapons rattled as they moored the boat, their mail unveiled in sunlight. They thanked God for easy passage in the sweet seas. Far above them, the Spjaldling's watchman waited. It was his duty to keep these cliffs unclimbed. When his gaze hit gleam, swords and shields were glittering across the gangplank, passing without permission. Hrothgar's man set out for sand on horseback, straight spear in hand, to stand formally and question them. How dare you come to Denmark, costumed for war, chain mail and swords? There's a dress code and you're denied. I'm the Dane's doorman. This is my lord's door. Who are you that you dare steer your ship from our shore? I'm the watcher of these waters, have been for years, and it's my duty to scan the sea for shield-bearing dangers to Danes. I've never seen any force come so confidently over swells, certain of welcome, no welcome won. Did you send word? No. Were you invited? No. You're not on the guest list. Hell no. What weapons do you hold? That's no small-time hall soldier. You're nobles. Look at their armor. I am done here. Spies, state your secrets or be denounced. Who are you? What's your business? Where'd you come from? I'll ask one more time. You're not coming past this cliff. Answer now or bounce. You, men, who are you? Where are you from? Why are you here? Their leader unlocked his word hoard. He was the senior soldier, so he spat certainly. We are Geats, born and bred, bound to Higlac. My father was Ecgtheow. No doubt you've heard of him. He was famous. He lived through winters that would have pressed the life from lesser, and though he's long since left us, everyone the world over knows my daddy's name. We come in peace, looking for your lord in Landshield, the son of Halfdane. Kindly give us directions and we'll get gone. We're here to offer ourselves up to the Dane's lord, and our plans are open. No secrets from you. Is it true that something savage walks at night? We've heard stories that misery stalks and rages here, that good men are endangered here by a stranger in this country. We've come to counsel your king on how to cleave his reaver and court calm. If there's respite to be had, I'm the lad to bring it. Otherwise, Hrothgar will be grieving and desperate as long as his hull hangs. I can see it up there on the horizon. The watchman was unmoved, his authority innate. He sat tall on horseback. I know the difference between words and deeds, as anyone with half a brain does. Thus far, I'll endorse your scheme. You seem a troop true to my lord. The rest is in the proving. Come then, bring your battle gear. I'll lead you to my leader and send my guards to circle your new tarred ship on the sandbar. Until it's time for her to read the ring-powered over the hill roads and be boarded again by whichever of you, if any, survive the sword storm you have sought. And off they went, leaving their own mount, that wide-rave rover, hitched to rope and anchor. Boars bristled from their cheek shields, gold forced into fierce forms by fire. The watchman led them toward their war. 15 men heeded him and marched with speed until the timbered hall was before them, shimmering, golden, the structure best known under the suns and stars to every citizen of Earth. This was a place real men could be rebirthed, and their guide pointed the path to it, then turned tail, saying, I've been away from my sea view too long. May the Father leave you living for me. I returned to my ocean post to scan the shore for other enemies. The road was stone-cobbled and kept them coming correct. A straight line of marchers, war garb gleaming, chains linked by hardened hands, their armor ringing, loud as any hall bell. By the time they arrived in Heorot, dressed for demons, they were sagging, sea-stung. They stacked shields wood-weathered against the walls, then sat down on benches, their metal making music. Tall but tilting, gray ash a death grove, each maker of armor den was twined to his weapon. A man of Hrothgar's company, admiring them, inquired, What kingdom sent you here? Boys, with your crests and shields, your gilt helmets and gray cloth chests, your sharpened spears? I'm Hrothgar's herald. An officer, and in all my years I've never seen such an impressive assembly of outlanders. You've too much style to be exiles, so I thought you must be heroes, sent to Hrothgar. The man, we know him, his name means Nerve, the leader of the Geats, hardcore in his helmet, spoke their mission succinctly. We're Higelac's reserve, trained and ready. Beowulf's my name, if the Halfdane's son, your leader and lord, will allow me to come to him. I'll explain my errand in a few words. Wulfgar, a Wendel warrior, renowned and warranted for wisdom and for the tempered edge of his nature, replied, I'll ferry your request to our king and ring-giver, Lord of the Scaldings, and see what, if anything, he offers in response. I'll return with his answer as quickly as he gives it to you. He went with haste to Hrothgar's throne. The old man was gray, huddled in pain with his retainers. Bold Wulfgar stood submissive at his shoulder. He knew the score. He whispered the matter to his lord. Geatlanders have come ashore, sea sullied from their long sail. Their captain and compeller is called Beowulf, and he petitions for words with you. Hrothgar, most generous, don't deny them. They're well-dressed, thus well-born, and thus worthy. And the man who led them here, he looks so right. His chest broad in girth, his armor blazing bright, blatantly of noble birth. Hrothgar, the Scyldings' helm, lifted his head. Beowulf, I knew him when he was a boy, and I knew his daddy too, Ecgtheow, with whom Hrethel the Great bedded his daughter down. Their son and heir is here to bring health to me. A crew of mine once crossed to Geatland with gifts from me to his father, and they brought back a cargo of stories. Ecgtheow's boy, they said, had a hand grip as strong as that of 30 men. As for his band of Geats, hurry, let them in. Holy, how good is God! A hero's been sent here by heaven to defend us Danes from Grendel. At last, that's what I hope he's come to do. If he relieves the pressure on our paradise, I'll pay him in gold. Go back before he comes to his senses and run. Bid him appear before his father's friend. He's more than welcome here in Denmark. Wulfgar returned to the Geats, stood at the door, and said, My king, the East Danes' leader in arms, tells me he knows your father, and that your seafarers are welcomed in Heorot. He hails you, as he would homecoming soldiers. Go, dressed in your war gear, your helms, your masks, and present yourself to Hrothgar. No shields necessary, no spears, boys. Leave your slaughter slingers here. Beowulf arose, and around him rose his armored army. Though some stayed to guard the war horde by request, they hastened behind their leader through Heorot's radiance. Their battle-bringers stood before the fire, glowing, and considered his words. His chain mail, the myth-protecting work of a smith, links netted to one another for war glory. His helmet made him look harder, so he spoke from beneath it. My respects to Hrothgar. I'm a kinsman of Hygelac, and over the years no boasts. I've been known for my prowess and my promise. I heard tell of Grendel from sailors. Seriously, the whole world knows the stories, swapped and sworn, of Heorot's hall early curfew, how every night you surrender to silence when the sun sprints out of heaven, leaving the celestial dome dark. Every elder knew I was the man for you and blessed my quest, King Hrothgar, because where I'm from, I'm the strongest and the boldest, I'm the bravest and the best. Yes, I mean I may have bathed in the blood of beasts, netted 5 foul ogres, smashed my way into the den and came out swinging. I've gone skinny dipping in a sleeping sea, I have made sashimi of sea monsters. Anyone who fucks with the Geats, bro, they have to fuck with me. They're asking for it, and I deal them death. Now I want to test my mettle on Grendel, best him a match from man into meat, just us two, hand to hand, sweet. Let me ask one thing, though, king of the bright Danes, friend of men, dire defender against the dart, he who knows what it means to fight, trust me on this, don't refuse my humble request. We came a long way, me and my men, to conquer your curse and clean Heorot. This task should be ours and ours alone, as discussed. I'm told your pest mucks metal. In that case, I'll make my man Hygelac proud, his fame fiercer. Your boy will enshroud his blade and fight with fingers and nails. No sword, no shield, no safety net. Nothing but my grip. A hand-clasped battle to the death. When we see who wins, we'll know who's got God's favor. If it's Grendel, I'll be a mere chapter in his gory story. He'll feast on Geats, ripping my men from limb to limb. And I won't be there to protect them. I'll be dead too, cheekbones chewed and face forgotten, my baddie dragged to his lair while he'll fare alone on my severed head, make a banquet of my flesh. He and I, alone again naturally. Don't cry for this broken boy, don't lay out what's left of me. If warfare revokes my pass to Earth's kingdom, just send my mail shirt made by Welland, willed to me by my grandfather Hrethel, to Hygelac. Horrors happen, I'm grown, I know it. Bro, fate can fuck you up. Hrothgar, the Scyldings' own skull protector, had some things to say. Beowulf, I count you a favored fight friend now. Your father? I knew him from a feud, which he began by killing Heathcliff, that two hand to hand. And Heathcliff was a wolf-king, so that shift couldn't stand. Your father's country wouldn't keep him if they threw him out, and he set sail oversea to me. I was a young king of the Danes then, hauling up a hoard of treasure that ladder's rungs burnt beneath me. My father, Herogar, had died, and he was the firstborn, the better. I was the lesser brother, but it didn't matter. I fixed your father's feud with fistfuls of old gold, my treasure ship to stop his country's wound. Ecgtheow owed me allegiance ever after. Oh, it hurts my head that the world knows of my grief, of Heorot's heartbreaker. Is there laughter in far-off places at me, and at my men? I'm humiliated, my hull force is bent to Grendel's greed, and I'm short of saviors, blaming the brave, feeding them to fate, God giving ground not to heroes, but to this 12-winter shit season. And yet over and over, when golden mead was pouring, warriors swore their safety was nothing compared to Heorot's. They'd sleep with swords with certainty, but when the sun rose, slaughter. Benches bloody, no signs of those brave soldiers, the floor a pool, where once it was a playground for poets. It's all written in red. Know before you dine, Beowulf. Your predecessors are deceased. But sit down, my new old friend. Boy, enjoy a feast. Take your place in the tale of my heroes and our hopes. A banquet bench was brought, an empty one, so every Geat could sit beside his brothers, and there they dined in splendor. At their shoulders stood a server, and he held a jeweled ewer filled with mead, sweet for singing and for feasting. A scop sang too, his voice surging like a swallow into the verging arches of Heorot, cheering for this party of Danes and Geats, all bold men met to bet on Beowulf. Near Hrothgar's feet squatted Unferth, Ecglaf's son, unconvinced, whispering churlish words. Beowulf's bravado bristled him, and envy ate him alive. He'd historically been glorious at the notion that another, more notorious under heaven, might enjoy greater greatness, and that made him gnash. Bro, do you happen to be the Beowulf who challenged Brecca in the open ocean, insisting you should swim in shark seas for no reason but to prove your petty prowess? Boasting that no boat should guard your lives, but that you should risk them away recklessly? I heard no one could convince you two of clarity, that you dove overboard, surfing on stupidity, swearing that you knew the currents better than any other, and that you, swole as a troll, fed on travelers, were superior to any swell. You lolled for 7 nights in wintry waters, and in the end, he outswam your fool self, skipped to the shore unscathed through uncertain, and rolled onto the sand safely in the land of the Hiethel Rains. From there he went to his home country, where the Brandings adored him, a calm and pleasant place, and returned to his hall, his host. His boyish boast was proven. Yes, he'd bested Beowulf, no matter your other battles, the tales you told, the lies you sold. Buddy, at least you lived. But this time, bro, you gotta know, no one's ever lasted at night, clasped inside Grendel's arms. Beowulf, Ecgtheow's son, wasn't fazed. Well, actually, buddy, sit down, you're drunk. Unferth, you've run your mouth about Brecca, me, and our sea swagger, but let me drop some truth into your tangent. I've been better on the water, deeper in the drink, and stronger in the swim than any man alive. Brecca and I were boys together. Our desires were only dares, one among the other, brother to brother. Maybe you know this story. But hold up, I forgot. You've got no brothers left. We declared ourselves adventurers, and so we swam, swords in hands for safety, unsheathed, father forged. We knew there were no sharks. We knew there were sharks, actually. No one here is stupid. He couldn't float freer or swim straighter than I, and I had no urge to leave him or lose the lesser swimmer. I was Brecca's lifeguard. I knew my duty. The rains rocked us and storms shook us, and for 5 nights we floated, warring against winds from the north. The waves like blades, bone cold, until at last we were blown apart. The biting beasts at the bottom roiling up to wring me, wrestling me to the seafloor. All that held me was my armor. clasped hands made of gold, chainmail, gain swaying waves and wet, the work of ancestors forging my ferocity. It kept me bold enough to fight when a monster dragged me down and gripped me, ripping at my skin. I was pinned, swaddled in squalor. Last chance, I took it. I put that monster down. I made it a sleeper as I leapt, severed its spine, spiked its skull, and split it into smithereens. My own strength sank that sea monster, and soon I was fighting again, lower than any human sight, outside even the edges of God's light. Dark heaps, hell's creatures in them, swinging my sword beneath the eyes of the whole world. I would not be eaten, nor beaten, nor skewered swimmer, nor drowned dinner for a circle of cold companions gobbling my guts, glutted on my gold. At dawn I surfaced in a slurry of scales, floating flotsam where formerly there'd been fangs. I'd sacrificed myself to save every subsequent seafarer from deep despair, and the monsters of the dark were gone. The east was gilded with God, and the sea was smooth. I could see the shore, the strong cliffs rising, built of their own bruises. If a man's brave enough, fate, when on the fence, will often spare him. I'd never brag, but the truth is, my sword slew 9 singular scavengers that night. There are no ocean-going stories more awful than mine, no tales of greater terror, no other man so sea-stalked, but I survived, my salvation in my own hands. The waves bore me shoreward, attending me, and left me at long last in the land of the Finns. The end. I've racked my brain, bro, but Unferth, I can't unpack any similar stories of heroics from you. Let me say it straight. You don't rate, and neither did Brekka, when it came to battle. The Gulf, you're cattle. I'm a wolf. I'm not even mentioning your sins, your kin-killing, your brother-beating. I'm not the man to damn you. No shit, though, Unferth. If you were the bitter, brawling brave you claim to be, your king wouldn't have suffered a single night of Grendel's rampage. No bitten bones, no hall whore, no chaos in his kingdom. Grendel was aware he had nothing to fear. Your sword's soft-sunned. No warrior awaited him in Heorot. The Skeldings were unshielded. Their hall was unguarded. He knew he could crush you, comfort himself with grappling, grind your bones to make his bread. He's got no fear of beer hall brothers, but this you can quote, he will fear me. There's no guns of note on anyone but me and my gates. Come on, Eklaf's sons, beat me. Or better yet, make a bet that Grendel's maker won't be met. Then, if you brave boys feel like drinking, I'll serve you ale for breakfast. The sun shining on silver and gold, daylight yours, after night's been mine. This speech was more than enough to convince the ring-giver, his hair gray, his war graces blazing. The king of the Bright Danes now knew he could defend his people with an assist from this warrior of the wider world. He got the party started, loud and lordly, and the hall welled up and overran with laughter. Wealhtheow appeared among them, Hrothgar's queen. Gleaming, her gown golden, she chose her chance to charm. She was the cup-keeper. She raised it high to show the men, then bore it to Hrothgar, Dane's delight, her husband and home-holder. She held it to his lips as he drank deeply, the love of country in each draught. He threw back as fast as once he'd drawn his sword. This old lord of war, and his men cheered. She went round, a helming hostess, treading with purpose, rings shining, beer-sounding soldiers, old and young, both of her own house, and the sea-slayer's goblet held to her breast. #blessed. At last Beowulf was before her, fingers outstretched. She welcomed him carefully to Heorot as a hero, a man who'd answer his hopes with hands, and who might, please God, finally redeem her land from hell. The warrior took the cup from Wealhtheow, eager for the end of festivities, for the night and fight to come. He was ready for his war, and a wight awaited him. Beowulf sipped, and the son of Ecgtheow assured the queen, "Woman, I knew my plan when I set off for this coast. Before I put my band in that coat, already I was bent on victory. I mean to give you a show, to make your sleep safe or be slain myself. Grendel's spikes in my skin. I'm gonna do as real men do and render myself a reaper, bleed him dry, or let death attend me in cupbearer in your place, here in this mead hall." The hostess was impressed by Beowulf's boasts, brass balls if nothing else. She posted up beside Hrothgar, queenly, her gold glinting. There was more celebration, the kind of party that hadn't been heard of in a while, rowdy and riotous, loud with the laughter and proud poetry, until the half-Dane's heir arrested rhyme for rest. The fiend, he knew, had been silent, subterranean while the sun shone, but now it was night. Darkness draped the earth. The happy hall would soon be a demon's domain, the men his dreadful diet. Shadows slunk from the swamp, and mists mossed the cliffs and hillsides. The men stood witness as their leaders took leave. Hrothgar wished luck on the late lingerer, gave him all hall power, and proclaimed, "I've never, not in all my years of shield-bearing, trusted any other could hold this hall from horrors. It's yours tonight. May you ward it well. It was built for the tenders of the flame. Keep your reputation in mind and stand unyielding against the brute. If I find you alive in the morning, I'll reward you beyond your wildest dreams." Hrothgar and his household left the hall, the leader and protector of the Scaldings borne to Wethel's bed for comforts, his wifely strife-soother. The king, it would prove, had appointed a watcher whose muscles were monster-matched, fate-directed to the Dane chief as a prince-protector. The Geats knew this already. They trusted their man, his iron arms and brawling brand. Beowulf stripped, removed his breastplate and helm, and handed off his fine-forged heirloom sword. His servant swooned over that sweet smith's steel, ordered in no uncertain terms to ward and keep it safe. Beowulf headed to bed, swollen with certainty, and swore this mortal gift from God. "I don't know what you've heard about hand-to-hand, but my hands are better than good, man. I'm direr than any demon. I won't slice Grendel with a sword, boys. Too simple. I'd end him too quickly. It'd be unfair. He has no skill, only reptilian skin. His mind's got no flair for strategy, though his strength is savant. No. I'll go unarmed into this evening, and he'll take it on the chin, if he's got guts enough not to flee. May God referee this ring and declare the winner whichever of us he wishes." Then Beowulf dropped to his pillow, and beside him rested his command of brave men, warriors of sea and sleep. They were ready to see life's end, and didn't expect to lay eyes on their heartland again. Not familiar soil, not their parents, not their wives. They knew the story of the slaughter. The dozen years Danes had been driven from their home hall. The Almighty, though, had other plans. A tapestry of terror threaded with triumph, the Weather Geats the victors. They'd rise with their leader, crush the challenger, and cruise through creation kinsman to a king. You know how it goes. God's the final decider, and men are only question-askers, students seeking solace. In the dead of the night, Grendel emerged, a predator without need of torch, surged to the shadows. Nearly all the guards were sleep-sagging, chins to chests. They'd stitched themselves to God, and knew no enemy could hem them in, not without almighty approval. Just one Thane waited, feigning sleep as the hour grew late. He lay awake, on high alert. Hidden by fog, Grendel roved the moors, God-cursed, grudge-worsening. He knew who he hunted. Wine-drunk, mead-met men, and he pined for his prey. Under storm clouds he stalked them, in his usual anguish, feeling a forbidden hearth, that gilded hall atop the hill, gleaming still through years of bloodshed. This was not the first time he'd hunted in Hrothgar's hall, but never before nor later had he such hard luck. No one worthy had historically lain in wait. The warrior worked his way toward the war, his head and heart hurting, and arrived at the iron-crossed door. Its hinges howled a welcome, and his rage ratcheted up. He flung the hatch wide and leapt into the mead room, over decorated floors, into the hold, fury frothing. His heart crowed as he counted them, man by man, nested together, roosting like roasting chickens. He'd be the sort of fox that stalks the night, eat his fill, no coup remaining, no bill, only feathers loose on the floor. Before sunrise, he'd planned to prize souls from skeletons. His word, though, would no longer be writ in others' blood. Red footprints to the word and out. The moors, the mare, no. Tonight was the night Grendel's goose would be cooked, his funeral banquet bruised and blue. Fervid and flexing, faking sleep, Higelac's servant spied from his bench, scanning slit-eyed the long-haunted hall, awaiting the hunted hunter. At last his enemy struck, snatching a sleeper, sucking him blown dry, staining the pale planks red, grunting, gobbling, gnawing him from limb to limb, here a throat, here a head, fingers, feet, dead. Hands outstretched to slaughter a second, Grendel dropped his first course, spotting the bed where Beowulf slept. He gripped that sleeper, though, and found himself conscripted, his own hand grabbed by a commanding Geat. The grasp began to tear what it would take, rendering him a revenant in the hall he'd always reveled in. His bones cracked, but he could not wrestle free from the clasp, war wedded to a woe-bringer who clung like no human ever clung, keeping him close. Grendel was an unwilling draftee, never before nor held hostage. Now Higelac's man, chanting the boasts he'd made his bed rhyme, climbed from the covers to get a better grip. Knuckles buckled, joints unjoined. The attacker became the attacked, racked with pain, attempting to escape, to race from halls to fens, his hidden highways. His own grasp unlatched, his flesh locks loosened. Try though he might to divest himself for Heorot and return home, dive in the dark and abide with any awful thing out there, stay in stealth, health the rest of his days. The room shook, benches splintered, and Danes dreamt of doom or quivered, questioning. The warriors wrestled, muscles bulging in rage, screaming for their lives, and the hall trembled but stayed standing, its design fit for fighting. The wooden walls crossed with iron bands of forest fettered together, though from what I've heard, the mead benches did stand on end, and shattered, gold sigils no match for battle. The two fighters fought on in the rubble, and I mean, damn, man! Until this night, no Skelding would have believed the hall could be felled by anything of flame. It's ivory and it's iron. It's careful cantilevers. Tonight, though, it risked timbering. A wailing clamor rose again, echoing over the confines, and the North Danes listened to the sound of Doom's hammer, instability building a home in the hearts of those who heard it. The whole hill quaked with the shriek of that almighty abrogate, the loner's lament, hand huffed by hopelessness, losing to an unforeseen leader. The warrior holding him was stronger than any monster, more muscular than any man. That stalwartest of soldiers had no wish to imprison the invader, only to slay him. Grendel's life wasn't worth living, and Beowulf had decided to end it. His own men stood as the unarmed enemies swung heirloom blades willy-nilly, though really their captain needed no safekeeping. They swung for the slayer's soul, but their struggle was for naught. They could have stayed sleeping rather than fought or merely watched the battle, for their swords, sharp as they were, couldn't injure the fiend. His spells warded him, annealing his skin. Still, his death would be agony. The world clung to his fingers, and life leaving wouldn't be swift. No existence snuffing instantaneous gift, but sickly, slow suffering, his spinning spirit sent to sink slowly down to hell. He knew it now. He who'd spent seasons haunting this hall, preying on poets, bringing pain to the privileged, infuriating the Almighty. His body was breached, its bones were breaking. Higelac's kinsmen had him, hand-welded. Each of them, living, canceled out the other. As Cain had Abel, brother unbrothered, Grendel's shoulders split, tendons twisting, arteries unscrolled, his limb worried from him, bested by fatal fists. Beowulf, the winner. Grendel, dismissed. He ran then for his grave, still living. He rushed to the water, wound weeping, layer his last longing. His hourglass was emptying now, his days done, and he knew it. Each heartbeat wrote its number in red, and the Ring Danes were delivered of their wretch with a ring. The enemy was dead. The ranger had arranged a cleansing, swept the hall while the Danes were sleeping, done that danger in. He was pleased with himself, a Geatson's boast proven in the Danes' den. He'd unharrowed Heorot Hall, and Hrothgar's humiliations held no further horrors, the darkness of recent fate now taking the form of someone lately late. Even if the whole wasn't here, but only a hand, Grendel's arm, torn off by the hero at the shoulder and hung on high, the span of his grasp displayed. Bro, I've heard when dawn broke, soldiers stampeded to the ring hall, chieftains coming to contemplate the cooling corpse portion, warriors and wild men from all over the realm, wide-eyed with wonder, overwhelmed at the sight of Grendel's tracks in the dirt. No sorrow there for those who'd suffer him, but satisfaction at the marks of misery where he'd conveyed himself from hall door to mere shore, bleeding out. He'd left a river of gore, and the warriors had no regrets imagining him dropping, a doomed carcass, into those wicked waters, which even now were blood-clotted, scarlet drifts. Oh, the gift of this, that devil diver deep in the dark, dimmer and dimmer, yet dying, dead. Here was the truth. Everyone knew it. Grendel was headed down hell-bent. Off they went, the elderly officers and the young men behind them, all mounted, white men on white horses, praising their heaven-sent hero Beowulf with every word they spoke. Not north nor south nor anywhere, they said, was there a man more qualified to be king. There was a lot of country beneath the coasts, a lot of open air beneath the sky, and even there, nope, no one better to rule. Of course, this unfettered praise wasn't meant to blame Hrothgar for anything. No. That was a good king. They were giddy enough to gallop for the first time in years, pale horses racing on trails long unused, though famous once for being smooth. And a poet, a long-term comrade of the king, a man mindful of meter with a memory made of myriad myths, began to compose the tale of Beowulf. His enviable exploits and gayatish feats, the sentences rhyming rapturously, since now the man was elite enough for permanence. The Scop had opinions, and he shared them. Compare and contrast. Stories he'd heard about another warrior, Sigemund, verses detailing that man's hidden past, stealthy acts, dark secrets, spat only into his kinsman's ear. The world roaming of Wales' defiant air, all those old tales whispered to Fitela, from uncle to nephew, who'd together slain giants, their swords strong as their certainties. After he died, Sigemund was shaped into story glory for his crowning kill, cutted through the hide of a hoard holder, a dragon whose cave he'd crawled inside, outrageously alone without even Fitela. He was fortunate in his fortune hunting. His sword stabbed at the serpent and sliced it like butter, straight through the scale to stone, and the dragon died, leaving bounty and bones to Whale's son, who claimed the treasure for himself. He loaded his ship with glitter. The dragon, even dead, was so embittered it melted, smelting dark intention into the metal. Those days everyone knew Sigemund's name, the most famous exile. Far and wide he swung his sword and his fortune swelled in the years after King Heremon lost his way. That king was attacked and betrayed, stung in Jutland, ultimately undone, his mood swing and mauled his men, emboldened his foes and fractured his friends. Senility was suspected, and his advisors sorrowed those who'd relied on him to think clearly, those who trusted the inheritor of the throne to behave as his daddy had, reigning righteously, paying promptly, shielding the scalding safety. Beowulf is surely such a man, adored by friends and men and every living thing, but other kings have hoarded horrors in their hearts. As the Scop spun, he raised out his hand, reminding the crowd to ask for tips. Danes and Geats raced, harrowing the highway with hoofs. The sunlight was bright and brighter, and young men herded themselves to Heorot, to gate at the glory therein. The king himself, hoary, hallowed, hoard holder, ring bearer, came boldly from out of the women's wing. Good man incarnate, flanked by ranks of ladies, his queen beside him, and paced a path from Maid Hall to Mead Hall. Hrothgar stood on the stairs, staring at the ceiling he'd commissioned. Amid golden gleam hung Grendel's attrition, a lacerated limb. First and fervent we give thanks to the ever-bearer for this sight, our long struggle cleared in a single night. We've suffered years of hall harvesting here, but hard times are done at last. God is good, Grendel is gone. Only yesterday I thought my heart would never be mended, the evening rending endless, this house of heroes red roft, my counsel risking life and limb to bed down in their home hall and defend this place from demons. Yet every morning dozens dead. Now, with an almighty assist, this man has done what no man did before. His mother, I forget who she is she still alive? Should be proud of her, prince, and answer her prayers. Beowulf, regardless of whether your parents survive, you're my son now. Adoption won by your wily good work. Be good to me, and I'll be good to you. It's what I always say. You'll need nothing in life, boy. I'll feed you, I'll feed you, and I'll count you as my foundling. You're a king to be. I've decorated countless others, treated lesser warriors as brothers, and rewarded the inferior for fearlessness, or what passed for it back then. Now, though, my standards have shifted. You're more than a man, but an immortal. Your valor in this hall will live in legend. I implore the Lord to keep you my ward, in his grace, and wield his power on your behalf. Beowulf, Ecgtheow's son, replied, "we're lucky to be living, having gone into battle with only bright intentions against a stranger whose might we hadn't measured. I wish you'd been awake to watch me bring war to your enemy to see him beaten, but it was not to be. I meant to put him in a headlock, lash him in his deathbed, and bludgeon him, clench my fists around his throat, and strangle till he gasped his last, but alas, the Lord set him free. What can I say? He slithered out from my fingers like a serpent, slipped my nuts, screeching for the exit. He passed his patches and pulses, though, leaving a limb behind, holding the door. His hand, arm, shoulder, there they stayed, proof of his incursion, much as he regretted it. Behold, nothing could live limited like that. The last of his blood must have boiled by now, braiding itself about his body, chaining him in coils of pain. He's dying now, if not already dead, a sinner awaiting sentence. God, not me, will judge him." Previously prone to calling bullshit, Unferth, Ecglaf's son, was stymied at the roomful of nobles, who took note of the horrible hand, hanging whole, armpit to fingertips, high in the eaves. The nails were notorious, hard as though smith forged, and the heathen's hand was calloused as a carpenter's, weathered by work and warring. Everyone swore to what they've seen. No sword could stab through that skin, nor fight fang tear it. Then all hands were hauled on deck by order of the king, to restore Heorot to its former splendor, citizens resurrecting glamour blunted by gore. The golden threads and tapestries depicting scenes of sweeter times, distractions and gleaming designs, now hung haphazard in the ruined room. Reinforced as the walls had been, they were still wreckage. Door hinges bent, braces broken. Only the ceiling remained uncracked. The intruder had fled first, afraid of expiring far from home. Death, no matter our desires, can't be distracted. We know this much is true, and it's true for all souls. Each of us will, one day, find the feast finished. And fattened or famished, step slowly backward into their own dark hall for that final night of sleep. In due time, the half-Dane's heir appeared. Tonight the king would dine triumphant at his own table, reclaimed from ruin. Never before had everyone shown up so festive, so fiery, to pay tribute to their bounty bringer. Every major man was there, pounding cups of mead. Even the king shouted for rounds, his nephew Hrothulf there beside him, spirits flowing, hearts glowing in Heorot Hall. Back then, remember, the Scyldings were not yet inclined towards treachery, though things would change. Hrothgar gave his own father's sword to Beowulf, presented it formally, and with it, a helmet and a mail shirt, a war banner, all precious property of his people. Beowulf drank deeply, pleased and petted, bedded to the utmost, gifts raining down upon him like pennies from heaven. The half-Dane's sword, the gold, the glitz, the rest of the hall soldiers watched it happen. But I mean, personally, I've never seen anything like it. So many treasures sliding down the table. A battle dowry moved from man to man, over ale, no less. No fighting, no fury. Nope, bro, this was a certain type of night. The golden helmet, for example, was ringed with ridges, wrapped in wire to tire any sword that sought the skull of a shield warrior occupied with other enemies. Now the king called for 8 steeds to be led into the hall, each its own horse helmet, harnessed in gold, and one mare was buckled under Hrothgar's own saddle, the same saddle he used for sword play. Gem dripping, blinged out, brought forth only when the king himself was slaying. That man, remember, was the first to fight in wartime, the first to kill, swinging before any of his boys could be slain. Ing's descendant dropped all those delights upon Beowulf, the weapons, the horses, ordering him to use them in health. Yeah, the Lord of Heorot paid properly, tendered treasure for services rendered in blood. Anyone who knows how fair it was, bro, more than fair. And more than this, even, the king bequeathed to each of the sea soldiers on Beowulf's bench. Every life risker got a golden gift of his own, and the man who'd been assassinated by Grendel was vindicated in treasure. The invader would have murdered many more, had God not gotten into the mix. One man's medal kept the rest from massacre. You have to look at it this way and reconcile yourself. God's in charge, always has been, always will be, and anyone who lives long will endure both ecstasy and ugliness. It was an hour for singing then, and instruments were hauled out for the battle-bringing king, who called for harps, epics, and heroic histories. Hiagalamin, Hrothgar's poet, was ready with rhymes, spitting the saga of the sons of the Finns, word whipping his way into a fight of Friesland the day the Danish king, Hyanaf of the Skaldings, fell to lack of fealty. Hildebur had nothing tender to say about the Jutes and their loyalties. She'd surrendered son and brother here, her home hall become a brutal battlefield. Innocent of crime, yet cursed, captured, spared, worse. Hawk's daughter was savaged by sorrow, grief-gutted. Who wouldn't weep as dawn drove few daggers deeper, the sun scoring her son's wounds, day breaking upon her dearest dead? They'd been her heart, her happiness, her hopes. War had wrung them ragged, dragged them to death across a court of sword-crossed kin. There was no fighting now, no. Finn had only lack left. He could not attack from here and battle to the end with Hengist. Though this had been his own hall, most of his men were dead. And what could Finn, the host, do to preserve the rest from their enemies? A truce was his only option, a partitioned hall, swords split in half. The Danes quartered in one portion, the Frisian throne and edifice now a shared territory. Daily he'd give gifts to both sides, his hands open as widely to Hengist and his men, unwillingly ruled over by their ring-lord's reaper as his own men, the Frisians. They'd all be encouraged in encomiums, given hope with heirlooms. Everyone would be hostage to hall jollity, and beer would be drunk without jeering, both sides pacified by precious things. This, then, was the treaty. The agreement was sealed in gold, all former fighters guaranteed greed grace. It was sworn solemnly to Hengist by Finn, and any Frisian who broke it, who thought he might divide the room with whispered insults, raising recent wrath with snide ribbing, would be pricked. The sword's point would decide. The pyre was pilt, golds unhoarded to properly mourn the Skaldings' king who slumbered on his death weald, awaiting warmth he'd never feel. The landscape was littered with reddened metal, mail coats gored, links bent, boar-shaped helmets dented where swords had scraped skulls, other bodies, too, of noble Danes, unraveled by gaping wounds traveling to journey's end. Hildebur sent her son to his last station at Heinjaf's shoulder, their soul vessels to be burnt together, family finally together in flame. She raised her voice in mourning, keening for her kin as the pyre was lit. Smoke smothered her song, darkness made of skin and bone. These men who'd been tended by those who loved them were carcasses now, hands melted, wounds running, reopened for flame ravens. Fire comes from the sane family's famine. It can feast unfulfilled forever. The dead of both nations were done, glory days gone for good. The fighters fell away, finding families in forts across Friesland, visiting the living too long close quartered with corpses. Hengist, though, boarded a wicked winter in Finn's hall, heart howling for his own king and hearth, the weather too wild to loosen his ship. For him, the ice and snow were tinted red and kept him clinging to a killing country. At last, as always happens, the season shifted to spring. Another year appeared, sunlight, green tendrils, the earth's bosom in bloom, a time for returning, the exiled yearning for home, but more than that, to get it done with, the avenging, without which Hengist would be unmanned. He itched to bring justice to Jutes. When Hun laughing laid a legendary sword in his lap, well, it was named Flamefang for a reason. Any season is a season for blood if you look at it in the right light. The Jutes knew this blade already. They should have expected it to twist, to key their kingdom. Hengist only did what he had to do, tipped the pitchers, split the ale, red rivers running under wooden benches. Finn fell when Guthlaf and Oslaf, hard henchmen, brought up the last winter's battle, blaming brutality on their bold host, and their grief on him too, the pain of their loss unquenched, the only remedy blood balm. Skaldings washed the walls with rancor, slew Finn and all his men, and bore away his world queen. They ransacked the hall for a hoard, grabbing all the treasure they could hold, golden collars, jewels. Onward then over the sea and back to Denmark they brought their woman, straight-spined, returning her to the country she'd come from. That dark entertainment was done. Words had won over wine long enough. And now laughter conquered conversation. Serving boys poured pleasure from pitchers. Wealhtheow, weighted in gold, processed to her place between the two good men, Hrothgar and his nephew Hrothulf, who back then yet trusted in the links of lineage. There, too, waited Unferth, at the feet of those men, the Skjalding's lords, who trusted him, too. Perhaps not as much as they trusted themselves, but still a brave man, though a sibling slayer. A brilliant, though a brother breaker. The lady offered up all she had to trade. "Accept this cup from me, my lord of rings, and lift this golden goblet. Give the Geats their due. Be good to them who've been good to you. Gifts are for granting, and your hands should be open, your heart happy, even as you remember, I know you do, the good men who gave kith gifts to you. Heorot's red walls have been whitewashed, purged of horror, and I hear you've chosen a brand new son, this Cain-cleansing warrior. I know you know that life is short, that you are mortal. The blessings you bask in today are boons for bequeathing. I ask only that you gift the kingdom to your kin, before your sword is sheathed in smoke. I know your nephew Hrothgar well, his noble blood, his moral code. He'll serve our sons and raise them right. I trust he'll treat them sweetly, if you should die before he does, repaying our kindness with son safety. We took him in when his father died, and if he recalls it at all, he knows how to behave. We gave the orphan everything, made him one of our brave men when he'd have been alone." She bent then to her boy's bench, where Hrothgar and Hrothmund sat, with all the young sons of chieftains. There, too, was a grown man, good, great Beowulf the Great, positioned between them. He brought him the cup, she called him friend. She gave him gold, her will was wrought in rings. She offered armlets, garments, a neck ring, a collar larger than any I've ever seen. Heavy as heaven is light, all of it brighter and better than any hoard since Hamas, who himself hooked the flaming throat chain of the Brisings, those amber god reins, and trekked it back across to his own fortress, fleeing Eormenric's treachery and securing his soul with gold barter. And later, Heorot, Hygelac the Great, Swearting's nephew, would be the final owner. In his last battle, beneath banners, he'd hold to his horde, fighting furiously, shackled to this sparkling string, this precious, poisonous thing. Fate would fell him in his prideful priorities, the Frisians following his feud fuel, and he in heavy armor, Jim governed, would be slain. He'd worn that same sparkle when he crossed the sea coop, but even champagne goes flat. His bling would go to the Frankish kings, from plundered breastplate to that famous throat chain, and lowlier warriors would gloat over the goners, getting what gold they could from Geat corpses, a field full of the forgotten. The hall thundered with handclaps. Wealhtheow went on with her gift-giving, thus witnessed. "Take this golden collar, dear Beowulf. May it keep your head on straight. Wear this mail shirt, too, a treasure of my people. May it protect your heart hoard. Guide my two sons. Guard them. Keep them as you are tonight. And I will keep you as you are, draped in delights. Your fame is here, and long after your lifetime you will be known. Your story sweeping through the sea, shores born into being by waves of words. My prince, may you be blessed by this bounty. Keep my sons close. Treat them as we treat one another here in Heorot, tenderly, trustingly, loyally. No one conspires to hurt, only to hold fast with brothers. Believe me, Beowulf, my Thane's wishes align with mine. The sole desire of those drinking here, it is to do my bidding when it comes to you." She settled into her seat, wine waterfalled into winds' mouths. It was a banquet unmatched in munificence. After all, they had nor foretelling of fate's fixed plans. A shadow stretched over sweetness, formless and fatal. Night fell, and Hrothgar readied himself for rest, his quarters calling him to sleep. Men stood guard, as they always had. The floor that bristled with benches became a swan road, white waves of bolster and feathers. And though one of those drinkers turned dreamers was doomed, he didn't know it. The Geat shields served as shining headboards, and on each bench was arranged a helmet hulking, a mail shirt with rings like linked fingers, and a splinterless spear tree-sleek ready for wrath, any time to be brought into play without notice, as was the habit of their homeland and war wanderings. They were ready to wreak havoc any time, any place, and their lord was a lucky lord. The Geats were hardcore, but even Geats need sleep, so sleep swept them away. One dreamer would die dreaming. This was nothing new, given Grendel's former residence in the Golden Hall, but his eviction had made evil dwindle in the minds of the defenders. That story, they thought, was over. But there was another chapter. An avenger lay in wait, counting sordid seconds until the latest hour, her heart full of hatred. Grendel's mother, warrior woman, outlaw, mediated on misery. She lived, ill-fated, sinking beneath cold currents to her kingdom under country, her line linked to extinction since Cain crossed swords with Abel and fled, murder marked to make his home in wastelands, solitary and silent. From Cain came more misery, a legacy of lost souls. Grendel was one of those, banished and blasted. He'd found a waker among the dreamers, a battle amid the beds, and wrestled the warrior who'd woken into war. Beowulf saw himself as God's gift, Grendel as a goner. He'd used his strength to slay the intruder, trusting in his father to protect him as he'd always had. He bled the Hellion, and Grendel fled piecemeal, no heaven for him, no honey, only rushing through a haunted hall to die in his own mausoleum. Now his mother was here, carried on a wave of wrath, crazed with sorrow, looking for someone to slay, someone to pay in pain for her heart's loss. She found the path and made her way to Heorot. Ring Danes were dreaming there, a murdering herd of sleepers, drooling, drunk, their feast filling them. They were the cream of the crop, but soon they'd be chaff, scythed from swordsmen into skeletons. She was the one to do it. The horror wasn't muted by the measure of women's strength against men's brawn. Both can behold slaying swords, gazed with gore, and scare the boar crests from war helmets, warming them with blood. In Heorot Hall, hard-honed blades were yanked from over benches, shields shouldered to cover blinking sleepers, waking bare-handed, bare-chested, stunned by her arrival. She moved swiftly, knowing she had only moments to sift men for her vengeance and remain among the living. She tore a warrior from his bed and dragged him, defenseless, to her fen. This was Hrothgar's best friend, most adored on the land between the two salt seas, warrior and retainer. And she saw him sleeping. Slain. Beowulf was lucky, bedded elsewhere. After the brawl, gift quarters had been appointed to him like rings. The Geat was asleep when Grendel's mother struck. Heorot howled she'd taken their trophy too. Grendel's hand. Man by man they squalled. This was unjust. A bad bargain that both sides should suffer losses, though the war was dealt and done, themselves the clear winners. The wise king, gray and battle-brittle, moaned when he knew the news that his closest advisor, nearest to ear, was no more, doornail dead. Beowulf, blood-blessed boy, was hauled from sleep, hustled hungover to the king's bedside. Boot to boot with his band, he marched to the room where Hrothgar waited, grim and gloomy, wondering if his fate would be fucked forever, the Almighty refusing to relent. Beowulf and his boys threw the door open to sunlight and rattled the floorboards, no ground given to grief. Beowulf thundered up to the Morse prince and asked, had Hrothgar slept well? Hrothgar had no words. He said some anyway. Don't speak to me of happiness. Hard times have come again. The Danes are in darkness. Ysgeri is murdered. Yermolaf's big brother and my best friend. My battle bro when ranks were closing and boar helms bashed into brain pans. He was there, hand to my heart, a man like no other, terror-tested, never bested until tonight. But a slaughter withdrew him and spirited him from Heorot. Where is she? Who knows? Glutting on goblets after murdering him unopposed. This is on you! She threw herself into a blood feud after you slew her son Grendel last night, tore him and bore him into the afterlife, never mind years of his own crimes. You gripped him, held him, and he lost the fight, fell to the mat and died. He's followed by another now. An evil intruder, his mother, fueled by fury, a woman seeking vengeance for her son. She goes too far, even as a soldier might in avenging his king, grieving the loss of his ring giver. That hand, which once stretched wide, filled with golden gifts, now still and cold. Well, I've heard my people, those simple citizens who live out in the muddy country, they say they've seen these two together, roaming the moor, wading out the mere heath rambling and of height. One is, as far as they can tell, a woman, and the other's misshapen, formed like a man, but larger than any man has a right to be. He was named Grendel, a fatherless son who knows whether he had any other kin. He was a sin walker, is all they said. Those who've talked to me of these things, they say too stalked the hillsides, the concealed country. They denned with wolves and dove in windy rivers, slipped like mist fish into the fen and through it, down into the darkest places underwater and underground, cliff-bound. It's not far from here, the mare, but it's a world away. A forest frosted but even in green months. Old wood, wicked and well-rooted. Water reflects trees like tangled teeth, a gaping maw that at night is lift with flames in the flood. No one's ever touched the bottom. No one born of man, anyway. Men can't go in. Even animals, a heath-hopping hart held on to mare's edge by hounds, would sooner spin on hooves and fight, lower horns and ready itself for death than step upon that stinking sod and dive into the dark. That is a bad place. Waves roil and they taste the sky's edge. Winds gust, clouds spit and spark, and when it storms, mire mixes with mist, geysers up, and heaven moans. I'll say it again, this is on you! Everything depends on a boy who knows nothing of this terror, not least what you might fear when you get there, the nerves that might make you quake in horror's homestead. Go in if you dare. I'll pay in gold, old and new, heirlooms and oldings lately wrought, if only you return having done it. Beowulf, son of Ecgau, was open for business. No worries, wise one, I've got this. When a friend needs to be avenged, it's better to fight than cry. Even when mourning, this is how it goes. We're all going to die, but most of us won't go out in glory. Here's what matters, though, for men. Not living, but living on in legend. I'm not afraid. Stand up, protector of this place. Let's go together, following Grendel's mother's tracks. I'll give you my fist. She won't get away from Beowulf. There's no asylum, no cleavage cracks in Mother Earth, no tree barrow, no ocean I can't find her in where she hides. Live through today, Hrothgar, and it'll be the end of your miseries. Be as brave as your Scops say you are. The old king stood and thanked God, mighty as ever, for the promises of this prince. A horse was bridled for Hrothgar, its mane knitted out into war braids, and the wise one, master of many, mounted his sparkling steed, his status visible for miles. His army followed on foot, shields raised, pacing murderers' tracks, leaving their own uncovered. They had no need to hide their hunting from her. She'd gone overland, straight through the dark, carrying the corpse of the comrade she'd killed, best beloved, right-hand man, second set of eyes for Hrothgar. The descendants of chieftains rode over razor-edged rocks, through perilous passageways, places off-map, paths too slender for company, where sea monsters sang and cliffs called for suicides. Hrothgar took the front, his crew behind him, examining her tracks, unhappily imagining the path ahead. Finally, the trees leaned longingly towards the stones, their needles bending as if to break the grave of ghosts. There was the mare, water welling up like something wound, wrung, red as blood. Though they'd known their man was dead, they suffered afresh to discover in the mare a dark gift. And there, at the cliff's edge, lay Ashteri's head. The company stared as water boiled with blood and bones. A war horn sounded over and over, but the soldiers sagged and sat down. The mare was full of monsters, too many to mention. Serpentine salt dragons, lizards in lethargy lying on stones. The kinds of creatures that surface seething in ship's wake to bare teeth and twist about an oar, foil fishers and bring bad omens to sailors. The beasts dove, furious and frightened at the noise, the bulge in battlers' shouts, the shrillness of seekers in their secret place. Ageat drew his bow and struck a slithering one. An arrow piercing its scales, it struggled, thrashed in the water. The other men, invigorated, sought to join in the killing. A second shot, a third, and then they slung themselves into the shallows and speared it. This monster they could control. They cornered it, clubbed it, tugged it onto the rocks, still birthed from its mare mother, deemed it damned, and made of it a miscarriage. They examined its entrails, awed and aggrieved. Meanwhile, Beowulf gave zero shits. He dressed himself in glittering gear, his mail shirt finely forged, links locked and loaded. He'd met this murdering mother under mare, and amid her existence. Even if she tried to smother him, his bone cage would stay intact. No weakness here. His helmet, bright against the bleak backdrop, would save his skull from the watery substrate, from the black mud and curious currents, hammered gold for a glamour god, made by one long gone, jewels and boar-shaped ornaments imbued by the smith with power to keep other men from dying. No battle teeth could test it, no sword slice that shine. Gold is good. Last but not least, Unferth, Hrothgar's left-hand man, unexpectedly stand for Beowulf and handed him his heirloom, Hrunting, an ancient hilted sword, written with runes of ruin, iron blade emblazoned with poison shoots, each blood reddened with enemy blood. In war, it never failed to score flesh, had never been wrestled from the fist of him who'd held it. It was a sublime soldier's sword, meant to limb enemies, and this wasn't the first time it urged a hero to perform the feat. Unferth sent his sword to the more skillful swordsman. Now note, the stone-bold-souled son of Ecglaf had been blackout drunk when he said that the stuff he'd said, the rant he'd decanted into Beowulf's ear. He wasn't man enough to dive into rotten death sinking someone so savage, he'd forgotten it now. He sought not to risk his skin, so surrendered his chance at fame. Why sign up for an endless night when another man is armored, able, and ready to fight? Beowulf, Ecgau's son, laid out his plan. My man, King of Wisdom, Ringbearer, I am about to dive deep. Keep these words in mind, the pledge we exchanged, that dearly done deal. To recap, you, Halfdane's son, said that I'm your son now, adopted and owned. That if I died in this dive, you'd father me to a further shore. In short, I end up dead, you pay my core, feed them, pour them mead. Also, adored Hrothgar, you swore you'd send Hygelac, my gold-get, to Ray for my Gade Lord the treasures I won, and show him what keys this kingdom's deeded me. What a generous quiver you are, what a son I was to you while I lived. And Unferth, to that soldier I bequeathed my father-forged heirloom, my wave-winging war-blade, I'll gain fame with his Hrunting, or be harvested by hell. Prince of Weathergeats was done standing on ceremony. He stepped to the mare's edge and dove like a stone, thrown not to skip but to wait, a ship-shrouded corpse. Darkness drew him down. Most of a day was done before he could see the contours of the bottom. She who'd ruled these floodlands proudly for 100 seasons, ferocious, tenacious, rapacious, yes, she felt his presence in her realm, and knew a man from above was invading the below. She swam and seized him, but his body was swithed, boar helm, war shirt, and she couldn't peel the mail off to reveal his dread fate, nor impale him on fingernails. She dragged him through dregs instead. The sea wolf slung the shoulder out of the abyss into her hall. He was too tightly held to wield his sword, no matter how he wished to war against her. As she swam, a shoal came seeking to school him, a scrimshaw selection of sea monsters, rising out of the dark, tunneling with tooth and tusk, spearing and jeering, sharks, seals, squealing beasts boring through the bog, biting at his battle shirt. The warrior squinted in the shadows and made out the domed walls of a hall, dimming back the dammed waters, the mare made sere by engineering. He saw the glow of a fire, brilliant light flaming up and flaring, and then at last he saw her, the reclusive night queen, the mighty mare-wife. Fearless, he heaved his sword to take her life, swinging with all his strength so the edge rang against her skull, but it was to no avail. His war torch was dimmed, his blood boldness gone. She was impervious to his blade. The sword had failed him, though it served many worthy soldiers, skinned many adversaries, slicing armor, hacking helmets into hash. This was the first time the heirloom sword hadn't overwhelmed an enemy. Hygelac's lair was bent on blood, thinking of legacy, of legend. He hurled the sword, useless horde guilt, let it shatter in the silt. He fighted like a man and take her hand to hand, his fingertips blueprinting her skin. This is what real men must do. Come on, we all know the truth. If you want to win, you have to forget you're afraid to die. The Geat was ready to rumble, pissed off now. He roared a challenge, warm for war with Grendel's mother, twisting her hair around his fist, raging, swinging her by his own skein, flinging her to crash against the kingdom she'd reigned. She rose again, relentless, and turned on him, gripping and flipping him. The pugilist panicked, his certainty crumbling. He took flight and fell. He began sick-hearted to hear his death knell, his sure foot fumbling, his fight spirit fugitive. She bent over his breast, held the hall invader hard to the stones, and drew a long knife. The mere wife meant to avenge her son, her sole heir, but Beowulf's mail shielded him. His shoulder safe in the scarlight of some smith's genius, linked stings locked to her blade. Ecgtheow's hair would have been filleted, recastorized as MIA, and left to rot in her cavern had not his suit saved him, and that, too, was God's work. The Lord Maker of Miracles, the Sky Designer, had no trouble leveling the playing field when Beowulf beat the Count and stood. He glimpsed it hanging in her hoard, that armory of heirlooms, somebody's birthright. A sword blessed by blood and flood, ancient, dating from the dawn of things, so tremendous only a hero could heft it, though all would envy it. Beowulf gripped the giant sword at the hilt, and then he, the Scalding's main man in desperation, not expecting to exist after this night, swung it at his enemy with all his might. And it was enough. He cleaved her spine. Those bone rings given by God were bitten through, the house of her head raided as her hall had been. She bent as though praying and was spent, sinking to the stones. The sword sweated red. The swordsman regretted nothing. The light was strong now, a brilliance like flame and tallow meeting in a sky sick of sleep, and Beowulf took the volume of the vault, itemizing everything. His sword held high as defense against any other awfulness that sought him in here. Hygelac man had more in mind. He sought to repay Grendel for his wrath, and every night he'd spent ravening, not just the first evening he'd come to Heorot, helping himself to 15 Danes and holding another 15 hostage, dragging them away from home into horrors. Against the far wall, our hero found Grendel, still as a sleeper, war-riven, a cadaver, cold and collapsed, heartless after his time in Heorot. Beowulf desecrated the dead, swinging the sword again and again, and rending the flesh, a heft, a wrench, removing Grendel's head. Above, Hrothgar's men surrounded the mare, holding the fort as best they could, and suddenly they saw the waters boil with blood, a roiling of gore, salt, and sorrow. They lowered silvered heads. "Oh no," said the old men, tightly packed around their prince. That was a sad day. They leapt for lost wishes, sure as they'd never seen Beowulf again, let alone witness him in an act of triumph, presenting his kills to their king. The sea wolf had savaged him, everyone agreed, and it was lunchtime. The brave Skeldings forsook the cliff and took their gold giver home, but the visiting Geats, now vagrant, stayed. Hopeless, heartsick, staring into the churning mare, yearning against all evidence for their lord to reappear. Below, in Beowulf's hands, the slaying sword began to melt like ice, just as the world thaws in May when the Father unlocks the shackles that have chained frost to the climate, the releases hostage heat, uses sway over seasons to uncage his prisoner, Spring, and let her stumble into the sun. The Geats' glory got nothing else from that estate, though he eyeballed the treasures Grendel's mother had collected. He took only head and hilt, jewel-scabbed, salvaged gilt. The blade itself had bled out, the inscriptions on it smeared to smut. So scathing was the blood of the slain stranger, it was done. The man who'd made it through alive, survivor of his enemy's annihilation, swam as fast as he could swim, undoing his dark dive. The mare ran clear and pure. Now the ruler of the deep had unclasped his hand from ephemeral existence, letting loose her life. He surfaced at last, the hardy-hearted captain, swimming to the shore, reveling in the heft of his hoard. The sea chest he carried, stunned. His men ran to meet him, thanking all that was holy, his loyal entourage rejoicing, shouting that he was risen, their lord, their leader, their all. They undressed him, freeing him of his armor, letting him breathe air instead of water. The mare was peaceful now, though battle-pinked, reflecting the cloudy sky above. Hearts singing with love, they returned from strangers' country by twisted trail, lapping the earth with strides onto known roads, safe roads. The boldest man among them carried Grendel's head, a hard task, heaving it onto the heath from over sea cliffs. These men were major, massive, and committed. 4 brave warriors paired off to bear the gore hallward, a skull spitted on a spear litter. They approached Heorot together, celebrating as they went. 14 ferocious, war-worked Geats, trambling down the meadow, Beowulf among them, blending into his brothers, matching step for step. That leader of men entered the hall a hero and made his way to Hrothgar, grit-ridden. His crew dragged Grendel's head into the mead hall, where a meal was being served, and a host of lesser men ferried cups to mouths. In their midst was the queen of the house, their hoard, their treasure. The Danes stared, jaws dropped. Quick 5-minute intermission. I'm gonna go to the bathroom real quick and give my dog a few pats. Woo! Ooh. All right. Beowulf, the leader of men, entered the hall a hero, made his way to Hrothgar, grit-ridden. Everyone's jaws dropped at all the treasure and the fact that the hero returned, and Beowulf made a speech to end all speeches, that son of Ecgtheow. So we're back from the brink, Halfdane's son, Skjalding's savior, bringing you this token of our esteem, sea booty, gore loot. No big whoop, here's to glory, and now my story. I don't mean to say this shit was no thing. I've lived through your basic fistfight underwater, a tryst with destruction. I did the deed you deem necessary, but I'd be bluffing if I didn't say I would have died had God not kept me close. Though my sword seemed severe, I'd have been helpless, though I had only hrunting. Hardcore as it is, it failed when I brought it to battle. God gave me grace. He sometimes saves the solitary. On a ledge glowed another blade, marvelous enough to mend the mistake I'd made. Trying to take on Grendel's mother in her own lair lake, speed was my only advantage, solo as I was. I snatched the sword, striking down the bitch that sought to slay me, scoring the other two her son. The blade blistered as it touched their blood, and rivers of red rushed over it, unforging from Fire Fang into what you see here, a bladeless hilt. I brought it from below, having avenged the Dane's death. That's all I need to say. Except that I promise you and every nobleman here, your sleep is safe now. Your corp can defend you, whether brave boys or bold men. You need not worry for their lives or longevity. Lord of Skjaldings, no fear anyone surging up from the mere. We're done with that damage. The hilt was handed off into the hard hands of the Ring Lord, a relic older than any ruler, rendered in iron by giants and inherited, after enemies perished, by the Danish king. When the gruesome Grendel gave up the ghost, when God won over him and his mother, when that murderous pair was rendered moribund, it made sense that such a sweet piece, this smith-struck sword, would go to the prince, the loftiest lord between the salt seas, the guy who gave the greatest gifts on earth. Hrothgar considered his convictions. He handled the hilt, an ancient thing, a fossil from forgotten days, squinting at the legend left there for the literate. It was engraved with an epic inscrutable to him, the story of how war woke in the world and a flood brewed, drowning the races of giants, placing them beneath the waves, a punishment for others, poor lord lacking unbelievers, sin-soaked strangers severed from sanctuary. On the golden guard the runes were written perfectly, the true name of the sword's first owner, long since ashed, for which it had been forward with its twisted hilt and serpent-slipped steel. There was silence until Halfdane's son spoke. A ruler who's been known as a good man since days of old, a generous, just gift-giver, a war-wielding homeland healer, is equipped to say the following. This man's as good as me. Beowulf, my boy, you've proven yourself in every context. Your name will be known around the world. You're steady, strong, and sure in all respects. I open my arms to you, as agreed, and fulfill the bonds of friendship. For your people, you'll be, like me, a defender and a hero. But hold up, hear me out, indulge me a moment. Heremon, that old king, was no hopeful hero to the heirs of Ekgwala, the honor Skjaldings. His rise was their fall. He raged, cut down close comrades, aged advisors, and when he died galled and alone, friendless though famous. God had given him grace, granted him wealth, health, and power. His road had no rocks on it, he'd known only joy. Somehow, though, his heart was not a hawk, but a drone. He bombed his own bases, denied his Danes damage, kept entrenched in combat. He commanded his kingdom's collapse and was, when ancient, loathed where he could have been loved, his life lessened with losses. Listen to me, boy, keep your shit straight. I've been frosted by frost seasons, fathered by time, and I'm dropping knowledge now. Here's one of the world's wonders. God is good. He's given us gifts, the capacity for clarity, Krent and our kind. He runs the show, though, manages every aspect of existence. Sometimes he gives a man from a good clan room to roam, wherever he desires, every instant filled with joy. Lets him run his own kingdom and rule over boys who guard his borders, stand-up guys who die for him. God does this for so many decades that the man himself, his men in the end are fools, forgets how things work. He shirks his soul keeping. There'll be no charges for him, he thinks, no end in sight, no loss of love or life. He wallows like a bear in honey unstung, and nothing scathes him, not sickness nor sorrow, nor does his mood darken, nor do his enemies find him. Their blades sharp and stealthy, no, instead the world wins to his will. He notices nothing nasty in himself until one day everything changes. Every guard goes down eventually, sagging on the stone wall surrounding the soul. Here, while the sentry's sleeping, a sniper strikes, sending a spike into the man's heart. Now he's poisoned, selfishness searing his certainty. He's never needed to defend himself against internal threats, but the greedy orders of this beastly boss make him think the halls he's guarded, the treasures he's watched over for decades, are nothing compared to what he deserves. He hoards, hisses, hides his gold, refuses support to those who've served him. He forgets his debts, fortune's amnesiac, blackening out bounty in favor of bitterness. Turn to the end of the story, I'll wait. His body weakens, fails, falls. An inheritor crawls into his throne and passes that king's heirlooms, his protected and precious things to anyone he wishes to woo. No regard for the dead man's worth, rituals, or requirements. Armor yourself against that kind of idiocy, my brave boy, my Beowulf. Keep yourself on an even keel, aiming your ambition at eternity instead of the everyday. Don't let avarice override intelligence. It's only a season that a young soldier's strength stays stalwart. Before plague or blade bring obsolescence, a cracking blaze, a rush of waves, a slippery sword grip, a spear soaring silently through the air, or even the ague of age. Your gaze will darken too, boy. Your world will dim. Death will kneel over you eventually and solicit your surrender. Hear me now. I ruled the Ring Danes for 50 years, fighting adversaries, holding borders, our spears and swords against assassins of every nation, until I thought my enemies were casualties, earth emptied of them. I relaxed into comfort and fortune, and just as we celebrated our conquering every kingdom, then came Grendel. He waited in the darkness, invaded my inner sanctum with savagery, broke my spirit, and drove me into a dark depression. Thank God, thank all that is holy, I lived long enough to see you bring me Grendel's head, sword split after years of struggle. Now I can look upon it, crow, and count him as a corpse. Oh, but I've gone on too long. Sit down, golden boy, heir of this hall, and feast. There'll be more rewards in the morning, from my hands to yours. Beowulf grinned and took his assigned seat, set by his elder king, a bench bedecked in Beowulf. Then the Danes and Geats got down to business. The celebration began in earnest. The room was filled, and a banquet bowed the tables. Night hooded the hall and wrapped all who celebrated in starry dark. At last the companions rose. The elder was ebbing, and called for sleep. The Geat followed suit, weary after warfare, heartsick for home, accompanied by a hall officer who led him from the company, there to tend every desire, a butler of burdens, bleaching away bloodshed in battle, packing off pain. It was no more than Beowulf deserved. He dove into dreams, and above him the hall stretched towards heaven, its gilt and vaulted ceiling shielding the hero's heart. At dawn, a black raven called out the melody of morning, the happiness of inhabiting the heavens. Sunlight snatched shadows from corners, and wayward warriors readied themselves for removal, hungering for home. Their leader was up at once, looking into the distance, his soul seeking his ship. The fierce fighter called for hunting to be brought and bade Unferth to receive it, with thanks for the loan. He complimented its blade and said it had been a friend to him, powerful in battle. He mentioned nothing about the dullness of the edge. He had no urge to nurture a grudge. Now the warriors were ready to roll, armor on, heart set on home. Their prince approached the dais where the king awaited and knelt at Hrothgar's feet, confident and canny. Beowulf, Ecgtheow's own, said the proper words. It's time for us who set sail to save this king's land, to tell you that we're overdue to return to our own man, Hygelac. At Heorot, we've been held as kin, hosted, kept comfortable, and if there's anything more I can do for you, behold the battles I've won. Any more of your heart I can win by warring, demand it. Your wish is my command. If I ever hear a whisper over the Whale Road that your walls are wobbling, that neighbors are invading, that enemies are afoot, as enemies are wont to be, I'll appear with a horde of thousands and bring them to bear. Hygelac may not be gray like you, he may seem young to rule, but know this, he has my back. He'll heed my call if you need help, and bring speech and sword to support me, assisting you with any needs as you would me, your new son. I'll bring a spear forest, a ferocious force should you need fighters, and if your son Hrethric should come to foster in Geatland, a Dane king's voyager in Hygelac's court, he'll find friends there. Foreign shores share their secrets with those who are themselves worthy. Overcome, Hrothgar asked him, The Lord, all-knowing, put words in your mouth. Beowulf, words of love! I've never heard a boy, a man, manage such diplomacy, such propriety so easily. Your body's made of steel, your mind mercury, your tongue gold, and as Hithrul's son should. I'm not saying he will die in battle, a sword, spear, or sickness slaying that princely protector of your kind, and you remain alive. I'm certain, with all I know, that the Geats would never find a better man to be their well-run king and protector. If you should want that level of lordship, that intense responsibility, I like you more every moment, Beowulf. You've bonded two tribes. The Danes and Geats are peace-woven now, despite our harrowing history. We fought fiercely in the past, but now we're friends forever. As long as I'm king of this remote place, my treasury will spill into your coffers. All that's mine on offer, from sea to shining sea. All the ships that cross will carry gifts to you. I know now what I did not before. Your people are like my people, perfect and prized, defenders of the good against the god-awful. The Dane's defender dropped gold in the hand of the Geat's glory, 12 treasures more given in health and wealth, and bid him take himself to shore now, but come back any time. The old king had run out of ceremonies. He'd kissed his new best boy, his adopted kin, throwing his arms about his neck and weeping. Two premonitions overtook him, shaking him to the core, the stronger one that they'd never meet again. Beowulf was so dear to him that he couldn't stop trembling, but in his heart's and mind's eyes he first saw that keeping his savior son nearby could only end in flame. He opened his arms, and he let him go. Beowulf went forth, a golden warrior striding across green grasses. While peering off cliffs, he tallied his rewards. His ship waited impatiently on him, tugging at her anchor. All the gifts given by Hrothgar would be weighed as they went on. "That was a good king," his men agreed, "perfect in every way until time, robber of vaults, stole his strength and swapped it for softness." Down they marched to the shore, bright boys reveling in metal dress and battle gains, stamping in glee. The Land Watch took note of them from afar, as he had at their arrival, this time without rancor. He raised his hand and rode in greeting, arriving as they boarded their vessel, gifts glinting in sunlight. He announced to the assembled that the departing heroes would surely be celebrated in Geatland. They pushed his ship and sand to filled it with a king's ransom, gems and gold, horses and armor, the mast marking the spot of their treasure. They hefted Hrothgar's heirlooms whole cloth into the hold, gifting even the coast guard a sword, gold wrapped it and gorgeous, so that later he'd be able to flash it while drinking, and say he'd been there when. They shoved the ship from the spit, keel splashing into salt, Denmark soon distant. Sails whipped about her mast, a veil for her sea gaze, ropes taunted and timbers moaned. Wind surged to skip the vessel like a smooth stone across the ocean, white with foam, lifted by light, until at last the cry was heard. The cliffs of Geatland growed visible, counted, claimed, and the ship sang out for the final push, thrusting herself at the shore, shoving keel at country. Their harbor watcher was already running, waiting as he'd been for days, eyes peeled for the return of his tribe. He tugged anchor cables, moored the ship to sand, heaving her against the current to keep the waves from seducing her away. He ordered that the hulls be emptied, golds and gems, all stores and hoards straight to shore. After that, it was only a hop-skip to Hygelac, Hrethel's heir, and the gold would go his way, up the cliff to king and company. The building was brilliant, the king imposing, enthroned in his home hall. Gigid, his queen, was young but shrewd. Though she'd only overwintered recently in the realm, Hiereth's daughter knew her duty. Open heart met open hands when it came to Geats. She paid attention, made trenchant thrift feel more generous than lessers over gifts. Nothing like Modthrith. Oh shit, remember her? The people's princess, an utter criminal. Bro, if anyone even looked at her in daylight, save her own overlord, she'd deal that man death, order him bound, each shackle tightened to torture, his sentence resounding from on high. Sword selection, then entertainment, a public flaying, arteries spurting, gore, good riddance. She may have been beautiful, she may have been royal, but can we agree here? Why the brutality? Pretty peace weavers aren't meant to claw, bringing good men down just for looking. Innocent oglers sent deathward. Talk about inflated offenses. Right. Then Hemming's son became Modthrith's husband, and she shifted mysteriously. Drinkers split a different song, a bathroom wall graffiti shrift. Marriages mellowed the monster. She changed when she was Offa's wife. Everyone liked her better then. Her father had traded her, hauled her onto a ship, dowry gowned, conveyed her from her homeland to other shores. Her nature changed when she got free of her family. She became queenly. Before, she'd just been the worst. She sat on her new throne, famed for kindness, loyalty, devotion to her king, and him, bro, obviously he was the best. A king among kings, and moreover, the greatest man who'd ever lived. If that's not overkill, so it's no wonder she learned morals under his hand, Offa's honored wife, as he ruled over his lands. From that duo, as proof if needed, came a good son, Eomar, grandson of Garmund, Hemming's kinsman, well met to all warriors, reliable in combat, and a keeper of comrades. Back to Beowulf, a hero himself, marching with his men across the sand, crossing the sprawling strand. Tidal flats and salted shores, making haste beneath brightness as the sky candle shone hard from the south. They hurried blur fast overland to where, rumor had it, their youthful king, killer of Ongthiau, protector of his own clans, was handing out booty in his honored hall. That Beowulf was back was shouted man to man, so Hygelac knew it, even as his warrior made his way through the gates and into the hall, war-kin to the king and killer captain, well and willing. The hall was cleared and the king awaiting. As our boy and his horde marched in, Hygelac greeted the warrior in formal speech, then sat down head to head with him, ready to compare notes with his returning boatman brother. Hairless daughter wafted wifely through the hall, mead jug held in her hands, caring for the companions, pouring a waterfall into cups as warriors held them high. Only then did Hygelac begin to question his comrade, calmly, commandingly, to glean the story of the war Geats and take the tale for his own hall history. Holy hell, Beowulf, how'd it go out there? You left with hardly a word and hied yourself over water to defend a hall, not your home. Heorot? And Hrothgar, did you help him? We know his woes, and to be honest, I thought them insoluble. I've been mourning you in advance. I've been dreading news of your death. As you may recall, I begged you to let the Danes do their own damn dirty work. It's them who began a blood feud with Grendel, and let them be the ones who end it. Well, thank God you're home, whatever horror happened at Heorot. Beowulf, descendant of Ecgtheow, began. I'm surprised you haven't heard what went down, Hygelac. I was proud, already written into poems. Grendel and I slammed each other in the very hall he'd been harrowing, murdering metal skieldlings, ripping hearts from their hulls, all of which, not to jump ahead, he got whipped into eternity for. Grendel will never have a single son to brag on his daddy's battle, to tell the tale of our night fight, no matter whether any of his awful line managed to live through a shifting civilization. Let me lay it out now. When I got to Denmark, I sped to Hrothgar's hall and presented myself, giving creed and clan. Once he knew who I was and what I'd come to do, he stationed me on a bench between his own sons and threw a raucous feast for me. I've never seen any company drunker or more delighted. More mead, men! The queen herself came through, that pretty peace pleader, and gave out gifts to bolster courage. A war torque for his warrior, before she snuggled up beside the king. Hrothgar's daughter, too, made the rounds, bringing beer to the highest rank, all plank arranged. Raru, they called, as she circled the room, offering up a studded cup. That bangle-bedeckled beauty is betrothed to Froda's bereaved son, Ingeld. The Skeldings' king chose him for her husband, Hrothgar hoping, kingdom keeper that he is, that sending his precious daughter to fuck his foe's son will fix the fatherly feud, heal bitter hearts and bandage weeping wounds, but spears seldom sleep for long when a ruler's fallen, no matter how perfect the princess. We can predict how the Hietho bards are going to react. Every loyal thane there, all will go well until after the wedding, when the young lord stands to dance and dips his brainished bride, her body dripping in a dark dowry, ancient garnets bought in blood from the Hietho bards themselves, sparkling stones stripped from beloved ghosts, ring mail wrought by their own ancestors, cherished heirlooms returning home as Danish dazzle uncredited. An aged uncle, already drunk, saying will shout, "Let's have a toast!" His eyes will focus on rings well known to him, triggering black thoughts of massacre, all that killing, all those spirits suddenly filling the hall. Heart pounding, he'll sound the sorrows of his people, begin to prick the prince's conscience, seeking to stir him. To our host and to the sword his father carried in his final battle. Don't tell me you don't recognize the prime iron he died swinging, that day he fought the Danes. Let me refresh your memory, boy. The day Rithegard was murdered and our heroes fell to folly, the day the Skelding shook the field down, scavenging our dead. Now who wears your father's armor? Some assassin's son walking into our home hall, shaking sword and status, boasting that he owns us, weighted with the wonders you should yourself be wearing. He won't stop, but will keep pressing, raising the temperature of the room until one of the Danish ladies is slain. Streaked with crimson, killed for Danish deeds, his slayer sprinting out alive into home territory. This will begin it all again. Both sides, vow-bound, will break, old thirst unslaked, a rage rising in Ingeld, his love for Freyrau frozen, comforts gone to curses. That's all just to say, sidebar, that the Hietho bards aren't to be trusted, their faltering friendship with the Danes, bridged only by one bride. Now, my main man, let me get back to Grendel, the story of our clash and crash, everything that happened when we two went hand to hand. After Heaven's gem slipped smoothly down to soil, he arrived, That froth-fanged foulness, that twilight tormentor, came to task us as we gathered in silent safety in Heorot. There Hanskjoth was fated to fall, torn from his life, first cursed on his quest. Our beloved brother was beaten and eaten, his gory grave Grendel's gullet. Let me be clear. Grendel ate him up. The attacker's teeth were bloody, his face strewn with gobbets, his body swollen with evil, and still he wasn't finished feasting, but insisted on leaving the golden hall with more harvest. Grendel was famous for his heft. He extended hands then for none other than your boy. He had a huge sack hanging from his shoulder, stitched with sinew, clasped with clever workings, crafted of twisted dragon skins. Grendel knew nothing of us, but this wrath wanderer wanted to stuff Beowulf and his boys into that sack and abduct us. And that shit wasn't happening. The moment I stood to face him, my rage evident, Grendel was a goner. I'd be talking too long if I got into every detail of the battle, how I paid him in wrong for wrongs. Suffice it to say I won, Your Honor, my king and the Geats as well. Even though Grendel got loose and lived, suckling at survival's sweetness a little longer, his right arm stayed behind in Heorot, holding the door, amputated, and he limped, anguish, to the mere, where he drowned in despair. The Dane Lord rewarded me for my life risking with piles of gold and heaps of heirlooms once the sun was up. All of us at table primed for entertainment, singers and story slingers. An ancient skjalding steeped in the history of his people told tales of the early days. Sometimes one of the men touched harpstrings, recounting his life story, and other times the king himself offered up an awesome riff, while in turn the grimmest among us, scarred and wizened, would hobble up to tell of boyhood battles, then shift to songs of old age, overcome by emotion, silvered heart aching for the good old days. We reveled indoors for hours, joyful and united, until nightfall came stalking us, a shadowy reaper. Uninvited she appeared, a dame made of damage, Grendel's mother slinking out of dark, formatted for fury, avenging her son and bringing back ruin to the room. Grief and death theft had possessed her, and she came to find the Geats who'd found her Grendel. She marched for blood, a rebel warrior entering private premises, and captured a counselor, Aeshger, the king's closest and wisest. In the morning, there was no body to burn, no corpse, nothing at all to call back his memory in smoke, nor limbs to light for love. She'd borne his flesh away and hidden it in the darkness under the mountains and rushing waters, her mere morgue. Hrothgar was broken by this blow, worse than any other, his scars reopened by razors. The king begged me, yes, begged, and he named you, too, to go after her, to pursue her underwater and avenge his loss. And if I did it, to gain even greater glory. He named his price, and it was done. Into icy waters I went, diving deep to meet my match, and found her, raging. I took her and she took me too, hand to hand, woman to man, water roaring red, splitting the current with color, until at last, in her own hall, I beheaded Grendel's mother with a sword too substantial for anyone else's swing. I barely left with my life, and only that by fate's choice. But when I returned to the surface, Halfdane's heir, bearer of men, gave me a stocked store of his own hoard, gifts golden and godly. Thus Hrothgar acted as ever he has, paying me for my sacrifice and more, letting me set my wages in goblets and goods. From Hrothgar's heirlooms comes Hygelac's inheritance. I bought these gifts to you, your majesty, and I give them willingly. You're the man I seek to impress. I've got no other family left, none close. Your kindness is my comfort. Beowulf called for the Boar's Head standard, the battle-crested helmet, the grizzled gray mailed shirt, and the ferocious war sword, and wrought an account of their provenance. When Hrothgar gave me all these precious things, brilliant leader, he bade me bring you words as well, to explain why their favors fit for kings. He told me this had belonged to his older brother, King Herogar, but he'd kept it locked away, never giving it over to inheritance, not even to his son, Heorard, despite his worthiness, despite his loyalty. Now it's yours to bear in health. Bro, here's what I know. 4 horses were brought in next, presented to the king. Beowulf bestowed these bays along with their armor, each one an impossible gift of blood and girth. This is how it should be between birthkin. No plots, no plans for plunder, no conspirers crafting catastrophe, no one sculpting death where life should be. The warrior king, Beowulf's uncle, was lucky to have the loyalty of his nephew, and he carried Beowulf's burdens in return. I heard Beowulf brought Hagold the golden torque gifted him by Wealhtheow, and with it 3 horses harnessed similarly in gold, sleek and graceful. The queen wore her reins well, her breast radiant with heroic history. Thus did Beowulf bring his bravery to bear. He'd battled like a brawler, but could hold court with kings and queens, never punching down, never mocking drunk comrades, never locking himself in combat with those whose strength he couldn't stand. He kept his stones controlled, and when he rolled only with equals. Mind he hadn't had this status when he left, a boy who men looked on as low. The Geats thought him lazy, and even their lord had never given him span on the beer bench, believing he was all bluster, no badass, thinking his position came from privilege, not class. But now, everyone who'd thought Beowulf was just a wayward boy got taught. The king, war-bringer, protector of men, ordered Hrethel's heirloom brought in, and that splendid sword, gem-clotted, the best by far in the treasury, he lay in Beowulf's lap. Then more, he gave his man 7,000 hides of land, and a hall of his own, into which he could place his throne. They both already had land from their fathers, ancestral sway, but now a better land that came from Hygelac to his new right hand, Beowulf. Later days were cloudier. A war began. Hygelac was dead by then, his shield yielding no safety for his son. Eardred, against the war-wired Skjalflings who patrolled, hunted for the young Geat king. They found him surrounded by his soldiers, slew them, and after that, boys, well, you know. The rings rolled down to Beowulf. He caught the kingdom he'd rejected and held tight to it for 50 winters, before he, too, found himself an old man, the gray guardian of Geat land. Across a star-studded sky in deepest dark one night, a dragon ranged, unchecked. She was a scar-skinned warrior, long accustomed to shadow soaring by moonlight, defending her claim, hoarding in her own high hall. No man knew the way into the dragon's cliff-top cocoon, but a thief stumbled through a split in the stone and retrieved a gem-glistering goblet. He robbed her of nothing else, just the cup, but up she rose, raging, grieving, though to cry out was to confess she'd been stripped while sleeping. This country, these creatures, would feel her fire. The instigator hadn't intended to ignite Armageddon, he'd merely slunk into a cave and found a crypt. This slave, seeking safety from a miserly master, became the spark that smoked a primeval monarch out. He spelunked into yawning dark and gripped at a wall. Instead of clammy stone, he felt a kiln. Instead of granite, gold. Whose forbidden hold was this? What had he provoked? He wrapped trembling fingers around the first small shining thing he found and fled. The vault was more than a treasury. Piles of preciousness nested beneath the coils of a snoring serpent. It was a bed. Bro, no one living knows the name of the lost soul who'd interred those spoils long ago. Burying the grave goods of a wealthy race, death had snatched them all into a sack and lifted them out of existence, leaving only one, this ghost custodian, mourning over friends, family, foes alike. He had no future for himself in mind, nothing but a dead end, left with only this haul of tomb treasure, nothing to spend it on, no joys left to consume. He attempted to wring pleasure from his stint as the richest man alive. There was a barrow already built, high on headland above the sand, secured by waves against trespass. The last man climbed the slope, carrying his collection, all the things worth saving, all the wonders he could find. He organized the bounty, performing final rites. Hold these, Mother Earth. Men have lost their grip. We mined this metal from you, forged it for fighting, ruined ourselves warring against one another. Man by man we gave our souls over to spite, lives flashing before our eyes, farewells to all our hopes. I'm alone here now, no sword bearer, no cup keeper, no hall sweeper, my flock's flown south without me. This hard helmet will lose its filigree, there's no polisher waiting to keep our battle masks gleaming. Everyone once waking now dream. This breastplate endured many battles, bruised by blades, smashed by shields. Now it'll be red dust along with its owner. Metal shells rest here without their warriors. Now there are no heroes, no soothing music, no harp, no hawk soaring through hall, no swift horses trampling green grass. We existed, now we're extinct. And so the last survivor mourned, making his way from emptiness to emptiness, listing his sins one by one, wandering the world woefully until death came welling in to wash him from the rocks. Afterward, an ancient collector, soaring through the starry hours, happened past and saw a golden glyph from above. A flame-tongued one who sought out strongholds as she scourged a slip-skinned dragon, tagging the sky with flaming sigils. Farmers kept vigil, dreading her smoky signs. He was hungry for even more hordes, tempted by temples and burial sites. She was known to hold heathen hopes, howling for a new hoarder. There she dwelt, this nameless fear, for 300 years, padlocking her hall with all her limbs until the infiltrator infuriated her. That slave skittered to the owner's home with the stolen goblet and gifted it to get mercy. Thus the hold of the old Gulp Get was known, her vault catalogued, her ring hoard rung, for the master clocked what he was looking at, a treasure protected by time. At once the dragon roke, choking on fury, she huffed her hoard, winding herself around it, revulsion kindling, flaring within her, the sore scent of an empty man, the footprints of a plunderer who'd blundered past her sleeping skull and seen her secret dreaming place. We all know stories like this one. A man unmarked by fate may sometimes cloak himself in God's grace, passing close to monsters unbeheld. The hoard holder fine-toothed the ground, fire foraging the man who'd invaded her bedchamber. Wide she circled, planning his disemboweling, claw-mapping every inch of wilderness, though no man there to capture. She imagined a wild battle, flexed rapturously, then undulated in her lair to hunt again for a missing cup. Only to rediscover the telltale evidence. Someone had desecrated her delights again. Teeth gritted, she tickled until nightfall. Guardian of old gold haunted history. Her urge towards more murder, it became more intense by the moment. Eventually, ecstatic, she loused us at the night outlasted. Flying into darkness, she was emerging and putting the world on blast, roaring into the sky, a comet of catastrophe. Villagers in the vicinity felt her attacks first, their lands blackened, but soon it would be their lord and treasure-givers suffering. The dragon swooped low and spat flame, destroying both manor and hovel, scrawling red RSVPs into the sky. The winged ringer had no time for survivors. She skywrote her grievances, then rewrote them roughly in land fire from end to end of Gaot realm, her scaly helm shining as she sang insults from the clouds. Back to her ridge she whipped as the sun showed itself, slithering into her gold stock, locking herself away. She'd exiled upon their ground, and now they burned. Black blood. Bah! She slept, trusting in human frailty to keep her lair unmolested. That trust would turn to dust, like everything. Soon Beowulf received a blistering missive. His own hall, his heart home, had combusted. He'd been ghost-throned by skyborn gold holder. To the good man, this region's ring-giver, this was distress unbearable. Punishment, perhaps, from the Lord. Unjust, he worried, weighed it. Had he broken old covenants, unwarded his soul? Doubt dawned as he considered deeds long done, sins kept secret. He wasn't used to feeling insecure. Meanwhile, the fire drake raked coast to coast with claws, charred Gaotland without pause, crimson blazes and black billows, until the old war king roke to action, plotting vengeance on the stranger. The foremost warrior projected for his own projection a myth-worthy shield made entirely of iron. He knew no forest gift could defend him. His safety lay in smithy. Linden couldn't withstand lightning. Though Beowulf didn't predict he'd die in this fight, he and the dragon both, he'd always known that fate could fuck a fighter up. No matter the hordes he'd hold, no matter the luck he'd had. The ring collector was too proud to bring a warband with him to march an army against this firmament fire. His plan would be his pyre. He imagined the dragon a dimwit, clocking neither her courage nor her grit. I mean, he had, for years, been up in it, persevering through pain and danger, countless grim battles since he'd saved Hrothgar and Heorot, since he'd rushed Grendel and all his kin, knocking that damn family to the mat. One of the worst of those hand-to-hand hells had been the one with Hygelac, Geat King, closest comrade, perished in Friesland. His skin become sheath for a sword, his skull become a cup overflowing with blood. Beowulf saved himself only by swimming, fleeing the massacre by sea, bearing back as he swam 30 suits of armor torn from corpses he'd created. The Hetware had no hope of joining him, hiding their heads beneath his own splintering linden as Beowulf ground them into cold sand. Few of them saw home again. Solitary, salt-scourged, he swam screaming over open ocean, Ecgtheow's son repatriating, grief-stricken to his homeland. Sigurd tried to quicken him with the throne, offering him gold, gemstones, a potent position, a life less lonely. Her own son she didn't trust to govern, to keep borders, trust against deploying hordes. Now his daddy was dead. Seem to have briefly lost my place. So I'll resume us with the solitary, salt-scourged. He swam screaming over open ocean, Ecgtheow's son repatriating, grief-stricken to his homeland. Hygd tried to quicken him with the throne, offering him gold, gemstones, a potent position, a life less lonely. Her own son she didn't trust to govern, to keep borders, trust against deploying hordes. Now his daddy was dead. She couldn't convince Beowulf to step over Heardred, nor consent to come to her bed, but instead he offered his counsel to the boy king, until he was man enough to rule the Wiedergets himself. Soon thereafter exiles appeared over the salt hallway. Unferth's son, who raised a coup against their old wave king, Onela. He was the ruler of the Skjalfings, had given gold from his kingdom seat, was master of their mead hall. Heedless, Heardred received the refugees and traded his life for it, his reception repaid in regrets. A fatal flash of Onela's sword and Hygelac's lime was ended. Swede king, satisfied, set off to the briny boulevard, and Beowulf, bereaved, ascended the Geat throne in grief, never surrendering his reluctance to become the ruler. That was a good king. In the later days, our man paid the killers and kills, avenging his dead prince by befriending Edgils, the last of the Swedish rebel sons. Beowulf sent him an army of sea-born swords and tied a scarlet ribbon around the blood feud, exterminating Onela. But hold on a second here. I feel that I am a little bit off course from where I lost my place about 3 or so minutes ago. Right. Oh, it's so good. Even rescanning this over and over again to find my place is just getting me grinning. I gotta get back in character though. Blah, blah, blah. Right. Very salt scarred. Yes. Da. Alright. And so Ecgtheow's heir inherited a complement of king's qualifiers, dangers rare, treasures tragic, constant proofs of courage, excelling at every impossibility. Till the day that is, it's been where are we at now? 2 hours and 20 minutes, and I'm starting to... And so Ecgtheow's heir inherited a complement of king's qualifiers, dangers rare, treasures tragic, constant proofs of courage, excelling at every impossibility, until the day came for him to kill the dragon. The Geat king rode with 11 companions, firing himself into fury as he hunted the lair's location. By then he'd found the smoking gun, the embezzlement that stoked the dragon's rage. The gilt cup had been brought to him by the burglar who'd begun this. And that thief, on life tilt, became the 13th man, rife with regrets, compelled to guide an expedition back to the scene of his crime. The unwilling guest of the king led the rest, in safety of daylight, to the hide he'd strayed into, a golden grave near salt shoals and trembling tides. Piled inside like scales were mounds of etched metal, detailed by the dead, along with the veteran guardian who now never slept. She was the sole barrier to entry, but burrowed beneath the earth as she was, there was no simple way to bring death to her den. The old king fell to his knees on the cliff point and willed good fortune upon the Geats he'd ruled, those who'd sat fireside, warmed by his gold. Stricken, suddenly unsteady, he foresaw his fate in the fog, shrouded but certain. For a moment he felt for his old foes, fin-bound, embarking alone, and soon his own lease would expire, evicting him from hall, hearth, and home. Beowulf, Ecgtheow's own son, manned up, mastered himself, and set it straight. I lived whole lives in my youth, endless combat, great wars. I remember every moment, even now. When I was 7, my father sent me out to sleep in the king's house. He dropped me on a new daddy, King Hrethel, who kept me safe, opened his hands, treated me, a fosterling like his own sons. Never was I less dear to him than Herabield or Hethian, or even my best beloved, Hygelac. The eldest, Herabield, tumbled into an early grave done in by his brother. Hethian tugged his bone bow, flinging a missile that missed the mark. Shark-toothed his sibling's heart, a bloody thorn. There was no way to mourn for him, no vengeance he had, for what could mitigate the blame? Who was left to shame for this heart-thieving? Nobody. It's the same sort of sorrow when a man outlives his son, sees the climb, the gallows, and the swing, sentenced justly for crimes against the king. The father hollers out a sob to rapturing ravens, witnessing his boy swallowing dust, unable to plead his case. No settlement in silver can buy a child back from the gods of air. The father awakens disgraced, in despair thereafter, knowing his inheritor's been erased. He has no verge, no urge to visit beds, no wish to father a new son, now his firstborn's dead. He stares in sorrow at his child's empty room, hears the dreary wind that habits there now. His hall is silent, cheerless, hungry, hearth without coals, riders sagging in their saddles, harrows hidden, where once singers sang and harps were fingered, where a yard full of sons were brothers. Abandoned on earth, left to live alone with only sins to number, the grey king retreats to slumber, moaning dirges. What son, what wife, what life, what song? This was Hrethel, after Herabield was dead. He couldn't bait the killer with blood feud rules, nor hate him for his wrongs. The murderer was not his preferred son, but still he was walked into the now blot-blurred line. Hrethel walked away from the world, losing the plot, heart-tortured, stone-faced. He marched alone into the flickering light of God, leaving what he had left to leave, bones, strongholds, and cold sod to his sons, as a rich man must. That old man was dust, but his old wars remained. Swedes and Geats got in each other's faces, fought ferociously. Hrethel died, dark desires rising. Ongtheow's sons banded together, full of war wrath. On and on they came, keeping no peace from overseas, but twisting knives and words into ambush at the hill of Horiosas. My own killer kin avenged that, sing it with me, you all know the story. But there was a cost. We lost Hythian, Geat lord, in that bloodbath, and Hygelac, my own Hygelac, drew his sword the next morn. He brought it down on Ongtheow, his brother's slayer, splitting his helmet, sending the old Swede to death, drained the dirt drinking his blood. Even his leathern fists, feud fortified, failed in fending off his fate. And me, I fought to repay the debts Hygelec gave me. Sword swift, debts edited in red. He gave me greensward, rolling hills, a home of my own. He had no need to seek any superhero among the Gifthas, the Swedes, or the Spear Danes. No hired merc to secure his six. I was always there, his constant companion, marching ahead, first to charge. I was the soldier who kept my king shredding, the warrior who kept his queen wed. I was his man until... Well, I'm not dead yet. I'll lead while taking my last breath. So long as this story and this sword stands by, even if I have to end with death, it's been my second in every battle since the very beginning. When I saw Deaghefren, the Hugas warrior, in a duel before both our armies, he brought no horde back to his ring lord, that flag waver, but instead fell bravely. Not to my blade, but to my boldness. I wrung that man to death, my fists deep in his ribcage, my hand in his lungs, his bone vault broken. And now I'll use all I have, sword, fist, sharpened edge, honed heart, to engage this snake for this gold heap. And Beowulf blasted his last boast. I laid down my life on the daily when I was your age. Now, Grey Guardian though I am, I'll show you how it's done. I'll kill this creature if it's the last thing I do. If it's no coward, it'll come out of its cave and face the challenger. He eyeballed each of his men, power-privileged warriors, for the last time. I'd go in without weapons, as I always have, if it weren't a dragon. I'd do it like a man and kill it barehanded like I did Grendel so long ago. But mortal skin can't contend with a flame-spitting fiend. And so I go in sword-armed, taking shield and a shirt of mail. I won't surrender when I see the beast, but fight it by the wall, and God will dictate which brawler wins. Get yourselves a good seat, boys, and look to the sky. Your job is to watch the flyer fall. I've decided. Don't defy me. I've more shade to throw on this serpent raider. Let the winner win. Let the loser get bent. My men stay here, atop the barrow. Wait with your war weapons. Watch and see who wins. Who can suffer more? Who can be worse wounded? Who can survive fire? This is my fight. I don't ask for intervention. None of you are strong enough to take this thing, to try and stake your manhood on doing in a dragon. I'll be the one winning the gold, my bravery the broadest, and if not, boys, this will be a battle that breaks your king. Beowulf stood tall, his iron shield upraised, armored in his own fame, his helmet, his mail shirt, his fate firm only in fate, a grit god bearing brute weight beneath the rocky ledge, no trembling in his hands, but a strong salute. He'd survived worse than this, a veteran of foreign wars, of battle betrayals, of heartbreak, flung himself from the cliffs over and over, and surfaced singing. There, a stone arch, and there a stream rushing from the barrow's entry, a boiling geyser, furious fumes and flames. No one could live long in there, not without burning. Beowulf knew he couldn't fight inside the horde lair. The dragon's heat was too horrific. He worked his wrath into a roar. The main man of the Wheater Gates bellowed into the blast zone, calling forth his foe. Under the stone, warmth turned to war. An echoed challenge bounced, and the dozing dragon lifted her head, alert with fury. A human voice. There'd be no negotiation, no settlement in metal. Fire walked first, dragon's breath surging out of the stones. Earth quaked as she rose and roared in return. The challenging mortal raised his shield as she emerged, a whipping wrath, a coil convulsing overhead, fangs, claws, and scales railing against robbery, ready for war. Beowulf's sword was already drawn, his razor-edged sword, that rafting heirloom, unsheathed and screamed. Each of them living was intolerable to the other, and in fury they fell to it. Feet planted. The people's provider held firm behind his shield, even as the serpent swirled, twisting and unfurling, her scales flame-swathed, flinging herself hard at fate, a flexing firework aimed straight at the king. His shield shirked its duty, keeping him safe for only moments. The famous warrior was, for the first time, naked. Another first. Beowulf had never before been quarry, God snubbed, faced forsaken, his glorious premeditated victory unwritten. The Geat Lord raised a saucy fist and punched in panic at armored scales as his sword slid, twisting against stony bones, his fangs useless against volcanic daggers. It dawned on the king that he was afraid, his weapons forged without sorcery, his defenses were all man-made. The Horde Guard rippled in rage, her mouth a fusillade of flames, so furious was she to feel even the dullest blade, her war lanterns lit. Beowulf knew better than to expect victory. His sword, unmatched until this hour, splintered where it should have slain. His ageless iron had never been conquered, but now Ecgtheow's son found himself engaged in ebbing, loaded into a rattling cart and exiled into a darker country. No one willing to go easy in the loss of long-held lodging. Everybody's got to learn sometime. And back at it again. The two battled furiously, the dragon renewed, rapturous, inhaling, uncoiling afresh. The man who'd been king was wreathed in flame. He knew his end was near. No one was coming, no seconds running to serve or save him. No ringed raised warriors. Those men, that former family, were sprinting from his screams, racing for safety, off the barrow and into the trees. But one man felt something, a bond that bound him back. He was kin and could not leave his king to die alone. His name was Wiglaf, and he was Wostan's son, that righteous warrior, that skyfling kinsman of Alfheir. Wiglaf watched his king writhe beneath the heat of this flame-battered helmet, remembering the rings that the king had given him, his comfortable home among the Waglumnings, his halcyon holdings and heritage come down from his daddy. He could not run with the rest. He raised his linden shield and lifted his sword, a blade with a lineage of his own, a weapon come from Eadamund, Othrer's son, that exiled, friendless one that Weohstain had killed in combat. He borne his victim's arm back to the dead man's kin, his engraved helmet, woven chainmail, and sword giant forged. Onella returned the gear, ring gift to a kin-killer. Though slain, Eadamund had been his nephew. Weohstain held the hostile horde for the rest of his life, helm, sword, shirt, until his son came of age and needed metal to prove his worth. When he was dying, gray and aged, embarking into the unknown, he showered Wiglaf in battle bounty, Geat witnessed. And now was the young warrior's first chance to align himself with his lineage, to fight for his father and for his ring lord. He had a strong spirit, and his inheritance was sharp as ever, a thing the serpent would learn when they soon met. Repulsed at their reluctance, Wiglaf sought to convince his companions. Bro, listen! Remember in the mead hall, we swore to our lord we'd stand by him, swore to our ring giver we were worth his investment, that would bleed in our battle gear, given us to us for fighting, not strutting. He favored us from among the flock. He gave us gifts, called us more than just mill-run warriors. I know he insisted to climb this hill alone, the head of our country, the best of men. And it's time for us to defy him. Get in the zone. He's falling. Do we watch him drop? No. Do we wait for his heart to stop for him to die? No. Beowulf needs backup. On attack. Let's save our savior from those flames. I'd rather burn in a fire alongside my ring giver than run home, arms untested against my enemy. God, hear me! It beggars belief that we wouldn't even seek to slay this serpent, that we wouldn't try to tear out our prince from his teeth. Men, I know if you don't, he deserves better than dragonfire, undefended by his own. We're swore to go together. No? Well, then I'll go it alone! Though my sword, nothing next to its skin. I'll bring my kin, my shield, helmet, shortened sword. And he sprinted through fire, appearing armored alongside his lord, shouting, Beowulf, I'm beside you! You'll dare risk it all and fight to the finish as you did when you were young. You won't be bested while your heart beats. Your fame won't diminish. Your history's here. Be strong, my king. Your boy's with you in this fight. Be your country's shield as I battle on your right. The dragon stenched any imminent surrender in herself. Her wrath rekindled her own unearthly serpent song. She brought forth fire, blasting it at those nuisance humans, filthy, false-scaled, and intrusive. She scintillated sword and shield, flash burning, Wiglaf's linden wood to ash. His mail shirt was like linen to her, so he ducked under his kinsman's shield, still fighting. His king shared that steel umbrella once the young warrior stood beside him, showered in sparks. Invigorated by the thought of victory, the king used all his strength to strike, lunging at possibility. Njegling was the victim of the swing, snapping like a straw. Beowulf's blood-tested blade was wrecked by the dragon's skin. Was not our man's word to be assisted by sword? No, not by sharp edges nor ancient iron, and his gray blade gave way under too strong a swing, shattered by too straight a stroke. Beowulf got no wind from that weapon. The third round sounded. The fire-breather rallied, rocketing from her corner and diving at that warrior, driving needle fangs into his throat, shaking him like a captured flag. Beowulf went limp, his body woundward, drenched in his own dark lifeblood. And here's what I know. Wiglaf, Wostan's son, saw his king collapsing and showed his bloodline's bravery and God-born grit. His fighting hand was singed as he dodged the dragon's head, but he dove lower, spurning safety to spit the serpent's stomach with his ogre-etched sword. With that blade in her belly, she couldn't belch flame. Her fires sputtered. Now Beowulf, with his last strength, drew a dagger from his hip, a lethal hunting thorn, and dipped it into the dragon's side, wounding her fatally. Blade met body, a bleak and bitter fight. Together, these two slew their foe, courage conquering flight, and that duo, kin by blood and bone, did it side by side. Every warrior should step up to serve his lord, throw down regardless of odds. This was the last battle for the king, though, his final victory a grim one. The old warrior's wounds wept the dragon's legacy. Scalding spit set by poisonous fangs, seething into sepsis. Beowulf knew he was a goner. His chest heaved with each heartbeat. He slumped against the wall, doomed but dignified, admitting defeat, easing his broken body down. He fixed his eyes on the stone of the hall. Arches curving over tall columns, worked in an age before he'd lived, by giants long gone under. And his new battle brother, better than any of those others, hand-washed his king's wounds, serving sweetness even in his sorry strength, unhelming him, bathing him, bringing him peace. Beowulf spoke, mortally wounded. Despite the doom diminishing his light, he unlocked his word vault. His time was waning. His brain was all he had left, and in it, an ultimate ring gift to bequeath. Death drew close and knelt beside him. If I'd ever have a son, I'd be giving him my armor now. But I never fathered a son, never gave my blood to an heir. And so this death is final. I'm the last of me. I've been ruling here fearless for 50 winters. I was the man, no neighbor came to war. My name kept enemies at bay and no one could scare me. I lived in peace and released my lease on battle, knowing I had nothing to prove. I wasn't ambitious, never threw shade, never took shit, never spat curses when I felt wrong, but sat on the throne and weighed my people's woes and wishes. I have to say, I did okay. Now as I lie dying, doomed by dragon, no one can claim I was a bad king. God can't call me a murderer, for I slew none of my own kin. My boy, get a move on, and bring your lord's last request. I want to see what prize I won of this. Wiglaf, go under that stone, past where the dragon lies, wickedly wounded, her treasure targeted and taken. Climb into her hoard and count my gold. Hurry. I want to hold it. I want to know what I did, to look at my winnings, my gilded gifts, the grave goods of a gone people. I want to know it was worth it. My dying will be easier if I see what I died to do. Garner a giant's treasure in exchange for my life. I'll let go, then, of all my holdings, my throne, my carefully guarded bones. Bro, here's how the story goes. Wostan's son went directly, obeying without question the command of his dying king. Still dressed in heavy vines of mail, he ran to bring his man satisfaction, ducking below the stony ledge into the barrow. He was victorious, battle brightened, and saw with shining eyes a trove of hoarded heaven, riches beyond compare, tapestries, piles of gold heaping the floor, that old moon-splicing serpent's lair. was full of ancient pitchers for pouring peace, goblets, cups corroding without women to offer them up, elements red with rust, artfully twisted armbands without arms to hold, and oh, all that old gold, so long concealed, so long inviolate, wriggling back into the earth despite the designs of those who hidden it. Beowulf spied a standard too, entirely woven of gold, suspended on the wall over the rest, more delicately wrought with any cloth he'd seen, glowing with illumination of its own, lighting the cave so he could inspect, itemize the collection, imagine it emerging. The dragon was gone entirely, no sign she'd ever slept there, done to death by dagger and driven into darkness. Then, so I'm told, that man plunged his hands into the hold, that ancient hoard of giants' gold, and filled his arms with feast gifts, plates, goblets, anything, everything his heart desired, taking also the standard, dragging the dragon's lantern down from the wall. And I mean, bro, the dragon was dead. The old king's swing had made that certain. The one who'd guarded the glitz, who'd shown her love by littering the land with abandoned homesteads and burnt beds, who'd made midnight her inferno hour, she'd been split into serpent skin. Beowulf made haste, driven by the treasure he'd carried, hoping his lord would still be living, though he'd been forced to leave him high and dry. He returned arms full of bounty to find his king bleeding out, pools of red letting go of life. Beowulf fell to his knees to drip water on the king's lips. The old man tried to speak, and the knife tip of a sentence stabbed from his locked lung vault. He stared at the gold, sorrowing. To God, the King, eternal throne holder, I sing my thanks that you've let me look on this before I die. This gold, this get, it's enough. My people lose me but gain a hoard gift. Say that on the day of my dying I went hard. I traded my life for this. It's a good bargain. My God, watch over my Gayots, I'm hoping. These people are your people now. Shout my last orders, tell my army to build a barrow before my body blazes like the one the dragon had high up on the coast. I want it visible, towering like a giant's tooth on a whale's cape, so my people know I was king. And I want seafarers to say my name daily and nightly, call out Beowulf's barrow as they pass in their tall ships, bound here over wild and misty. The king unlatched his heavy golden collar, handing it off to his young defender, giving him also his ornate helmet and warshoot, instructing him to wear them well. You're the end of the line, boy. The last standing Waegvandig. Living has killed us all. We're dustbinned by destiny. My courageous clan of noblemen have gone to ghost. Now I serve at their command. Those were the warrior's last words. He had no more wisdom, no more secrets, before he consigned himself to the pyre. The final battle fire for a body brutally broken. Beowulf's soul stepped from his breast to see what it could see. It was agony for the would-be savior, so young, to see his dear kinsman death-rattling on barren ground. The dragon, that deep dweller, lay dead as well, having done in her enemy. She was limp and lifeless, her looping spine and scales no longer lolling about piles of gold, no longer ring-guarding. Keen-edged blades, sweat-hammered and fervently fled, had bitten her, broken her of soaring flight, ended her adventures, leaving her stiff as a shovel-split snake, dead in dark dirt beside. A gilded grave. Never again would she soar through a starry sky, revel in rising rhapsody, rolling in and out of clouds and mist, a raging rainbow, glinting golden. She plummeted, earth-struck, blunted in blissful brutality by Beowulf. Hardly in history has there been a man born, or so I'm told, who, brawny and brave as men may be, would be able to battle such a one, to throw himself into her biting breath, or even creep into her lair for fortune's sake, and fearlessly find the treasure keeper there, her eyes open, a wonder ward. The ancient hoard had changed ownership now, bought by Beowulf's blood. Both he and his enemy had seen the edge of existence, and then tripped and fell over it. It wasn't long before the forest-fled retainers attempted to regain their status, those 10 men who'd run for the hills, abandoning their king as the Winged One was roaring in. The cowards who'd put their blades behind their backs when he'd needed their strength shambled out of the woods, shields lifted, armor still on, to where the old king lay collapsed. They found Wiglaf, crumbled beside him, heartsick, his shoulder to the shoulder of his load, trying to wake him with water, but it was over. There was no will left in Beowulf, no life spark to be ignited. God had decided, as he always does. We all know it, and bro, nobody changes God's mind. The young warrior had words for them, though, terse words for the cowards who'd abandoned their king. Wiglaf, Weostan's son, spat severity at the soldiers he'd found wanting. Anyone with half a brain's well aware that this king treated us like princes, giving us gifts, the gear that guard even us now. He opened his arms, offered all who stood in this mead hall armor, helmets, mail shirts, treasures. He treated us as thanes like his own sons, gave us the glories he'd won, but hey, I guess he had no judgment. He threw those gifts away. What a fucking waste. In time of war, to armor and honor a corps of soldiers who'd ignore him when he needed them the most. Our king had no cause to boast of his fight family. He never saw them fight. God allotted him a blow. He'd forced his blade into the fray, braver than all of you put together. I couldn't keep him safe, defending his flank, but God gave me strength to swing and help him. At least I, alone among these ranks, tried. My sword sank in, the enemy was injured, the dragonfire's oath dimmed her advances weaker. But I couldn't save him. Too few of you were loyal to our brave lord in time of trouble. Well, kiss it all goodbye, boys. Those treasures you hoarded, those gifts, those sparkling unswung swords, the homes you held by kingling of our king, that shit is gone. Your families will founder, your freeholds will fall. The moment outland princers hear how you hid yourselves, disgraced your king, and let him die undefended. Are you warriors or weaklings? You should kill yourselves rather than live, having dealt him this damage. Wiglaf ordered that the battle's end be shouted out, bad tidings brought to the men camped at the ridge, retainers and unchosen warriors waiting heavy-hearted for reports. They'd spent the morning kneeling, nervous for their beloved lord, expecting all and any outcome. King's death, or return of the king. The messenger shouted truth, plainly without hesitation. The rider sped to the headland, forecasting for all to hear. The people's prince, the Vader's lord and love, the Geat's gold giver is gone. The king is dead, the dragon did him in, but she's dead too. Stretched beside him, an enemy slain by silver stagging, a knife. Beowulf's sword could not kill her, no matter how hard he tried. Wiglaf is there now with them both. Weostan's son, a survivor holding vigil for his dead. A warrior's wake for both the dear and the detested. Now listen up. War is coming for us, for this country. Soon our enemies will hear our king's been killed. From sea to sea, everyone from Franks to Frisians will mobilize. Historic hatreds, the Franks. Oh, oops. Historic hatreds, the Franks have felt fury since Hygelac led a flotilla of warships into Friesland. Though the Hetware held him there, attacked him, and won with woeful odds. Our leader, battle-dressed, was taken then, his body falling, his army mourning. He gave no winnings to his fighting force. The Merovingians haven't forgiven us. No kindness will come from the Swedes either, only vow-breaking, peace pacts poisoned. Anchthiau, as everyone knows, slew Hæstian, Hrethel's boy, at Ravenswood back when the Geats first attacked Battle-Skilflings. Vengeance was swift for the Geat attack. Othrier's father was ferocious, a seasoned elder general, and he slashed that seafarer, Hæstian, and repossessed his own wife. Mother too, both Othrier and Onella, who'd been kidnapped, golden rings wrung from her fingers. Anchthiau wasn't finished. He pursued his Geatish enemies, driving them, panicked and bereft of their leader, to Ravenswood, where he and his company ran rings around the remnants, reminding them how weak they were. Through the back hours, he swore at them, promising punishments, telling them when the sun rose he'd shine his sword on selected scalps and string other shoulders from the gallows, make them treacle sweets for birds' beaks. But at dawn, when they were despairing, they heard the horn of Hygelac, and that hero came for them, following their trail with troops. The Swedes and Geats battled and plowed a bloody path identifiable for miles, and no one, not even fools, could think them finished fighting. The old man plotted murder and made a move, retreated with his people. Ongthial knew higher ground would help him, but he knew too that Hygelac was hard, famous for his fight skills. The old man couldn't last long against the sea warriors, not while keeping his wife, children, and followers safe. He damned them in behind sheltering walls, but Hygelac's man breached them, pouring into the sanctuary like floodwater, drowning camp and confines. Ongthial stood firm, grey and proud, but he was trapped, surrounded by swords, and Jofriar was appointed the Swedes' king, judge, and jury. Wulf, Onward's son, rushed the old man in rage, struck him so that blood soaked his hair. And still he did not back down, but raised his own sword and hacked, harder than he'd been hit. The Swede king spun and struck, fighting for his people. Onward's son couldn't take him. Brave wolf though he was, and his blows glanced off until Ongthial split his helmet and forced him to flee, falling, head bloodied, dazed though not dead. He was hurt, but he held, and finally his brother Hygelac's loyal thane, Iofar, lifted his own sword, an ancient piece etched in ogre runes, and smashed it into the old man's giant forged helmet, slashing past his shield. And at last, Ongthial fell, the defender of his realm, done and gone. Everyone ran to assist Wulf, to bandage him and carry him from the field. Now they were custodians of the bloody mud. The walking warrior stripped Ongthial of his gear, his iron mail, his fierce sword, his helmet, and ferried all this war treasure to Hygelac, who took the offering and said the giver would be repaid. He told the truth, and for their courage, Hrethul's heir, now king of the Geats, gave Ulfthor and Wulf 100,000 each in land gifts and interlocked rings of wealth to ratchet them up in status. And that was a good king. None could critique his open hands. He also gave over to Iofar his only daughter, a bedmate to bind him, a kin bond, a vow of loyalty. So to sum it up, the feud with the Swedes isn't over, and needs only this blood to activate it again. A border swarm, a war walking into Geatland the moment they learn that Beowulf is gone. He's been keeping us safe for decades, counting coffers, fattening the kingdom against invaders, defending his citizens, and all the while killing monsters too. Come now, hurry men, send him off on his journey, pay him our respects. Let's carry our king and ring giver to his funeral rites. His pyre will be built, heaped with glory for melting, which he won with his life. The death hoard is too heavy for our hearts, and it will be burned along with him who won it. That gold isn't for decorating followers, not for starring the bosoms of young women or latching in memory onto loyal throats, no. Now it is a time for mourning, for walking downcast the exile's road, gray-garbed and firmed, for the king is dead. His song is silence, his laughter and entertainment forgotten. Take down your spears and touch that dawn-chilled metal, raise them towards a clouded world. No harp music will play to call warriors in, but instead will waken to the raven, a rush of black wings telling in raw song how she's watched the wolf and eagle worrying our dead, carrion clawed competing over the feast. That was the end of the forecast, and the augur wasn't wrong. That messenger delivered it as evenly as such bad news can be delivered. The troop was weeping, but they rose, and went in woeful rows to Eager's Cape, where, on the cold sand, they found their king. Soul long spent, that man who'd given them everything he had, whose rings had warmed their hands. It was the end of his epic, the climatic close, and Beowulf, their warrior king, died mighty. They saw beside him a wrathful wonder. A sky dragon became ground ghost. That flame spitter, scourge of the coasts, had been scathed and sooted by her own song. She was 50 feet long, she who'd ruled in writhing rapture over their dreaming hours, diving through dawns to nest with her treasure, and now death had won her. The worm would no longer writhe with coins, but with worms. Beside her lay the dragon's dowry, grave good goblets and cups, dishes and knives, rust devouring them now. Though they'd spent 1,000 winters serving the ghosts of powerful men, there was a spell on the hoard, left by a skeleton tribe, a ward, that said no man could touch it, unless God, glory dispenser and hoarder of humanity, chose a hero and gave permission for the treasures to disperse. What had he hoped, the man who'd pressed his people's precious things into a cave beneath the cape? All his keeping came to nothing. First, the dragon killed the king, and then the king killed the dragon. Maybe a man's mighty, maybe he's known to all as a warrior, but death has his number. No one knows when it'll be called, when he'll have to walk backward out of the beer hall, exiled from life. So it was for Beowulf when he sought a battle in a barrow. Sure, the grave guardian was formidable, but our hero had no intention he was falling out of earth. The curse on that stony womb was set by men who'd impregnated it with treasure, claiming the confines theirs until doomsday. If they couldn't possess them, no one could. Any man who thieved was fated to perish, pushed into pagan places, punished forever. Beowulf never imagined gold could bring grief. He forgot. Not all gifts are forgetting. Wiglaf, Weostan's son, took the floor. One man slipped down this slope, he alone deciding, but we rest or roped to him. Many will suffer similar fates now. No counselor could convince our king, our old and beloved protector, that she shouldn't come at the guardian of this gold, but instead let her dream unmolested, drowsing alongside her beloved hoard, ground-nested until world's end. Beowulf's fate was written too. He opened the barrow and showed us its bounty, but he paid in blood and bone. His destiny was too tempting, and it drew him here. I've been inside, counted treasures heaped in the dark, given my ticket to voyage solitary, under tons of soil. I heaped a heap of heart-won gold into my arms, precious beyond compare, and bore it here, to share it with my king. I carried all this treasure to where Beowulf could view it. He was alive then, though fading. He listed his longings. His last command bade me welcome you, man by man, and bid you build a barrow great enough to justify his gifts and his going. He wanted a memorial built to last, to light the future. Because of all men who've ever lived, he was the strongest, and the bravest, and the brightest, and the best. Now come with me. Let us look on the treasure together, piled against the wall. I'll lead you to the dragon's lair and show you, up close, the golden ornaments, so you'll know what your king died for. Meanwhile, let the beer be readied. So when we emerge, we can carry Beowulf to it, lay among him our love, and send him to his new hall under the throne of the Lord. Weostan's son, courageous as ever, hoarded heroes and haul hoarders to the forest, to chop logs and splinter trees. All those men, with men of their own, collected kindling for the king. Now he'll be consumed. Let a white and brilliant flame catch our leader. Let the fire take him, our famous man, who fought off slings and arrows, who battled armies, who never backed down. At last, a shaft sounded his depths, pursuing the barb as it primed his heart, feathers fanning across his breast. The son of Weostan summoned 7 of the best men to descend again into darkness, and went alongside them, the 8th man, entering that cursed place. One soldier, the man in front, carried a light. No one sought to gamble or grab. The guard was gone, and the challenge was pointless. They carried it all out, dazzled draped, a heaving horde of gore, brought gold unprotected, and piled it into public. It was easy to enact their leader's last wish. Then they had heaved the dragon over the cliffs into the sea, brine bedding that beast bride, that ring taker. The endless accursed treasures they stacked on the cart, and bore them with their dead leader, his skin gone gray as a barnacle to Whale's Cape. The Geats began the pyre, howling over Beowulf, their best brother, hanging horde helmets about it, shields and steel shirts as he'd insisted. They placed him in the center of all this treasure, their lost love, and built a bonfire worthy of men's ills. Storm smoke shuddered from the blaze thick and dark, and the flames keened louder than any man's weeping. The whipping winds momentarily stilled, until Beowulf's heart helm broke. His bones blackened as his bow bellowed with grief. Then another dirge rose, woven uninvited by a Geatish woman, louder than the rest. She tore her hair and screamed her horror at the hell that was to come. More of the same. Reaping, raping, feasts of blood, iron fortunes, marching across her country, claiming her body. The sky sipped smoke, and it smiled. The Geats got down to it, driving the materials of memorial into a mound, a promontory crowned with Beowulf's marker, lit so sailors could see it from afar. 10 days it took to make their hero's new home. It contained, walled up, the remnant of his hoard gold, wrought to remain long after the Geats were gone. Rings of kings and torques, jewels clouded with black smoke, the dragon's darlings, and before her that lost tribes, a trove of treasure trespass cursed from out of earth, now gone to ground again. They covered it over with gravel, and I hear it still there, a leftover lament, lacking living hands for spending. "12 thanes, battle-tested sons of worthy men, took themselves to horseback and cursed around the tomb, weeping, ringing the old songs from their tongues, dirge chanting, telling the legend of Beowulf, their king, his courage, his fury, his wars. They did all this grieving the way men do. But bro, no man knows, not me, not you, how to get to goodbye. His guys tried. They remembered the right words. Our king, lonely ring-wielder, inheritor of everything. He was our man, but every man dies. Here he is now, here our best boy lies. He rode hard, he stayed thirsty. He was the man. He was the man." Oh. Did we notice how I was fighting back some manly tears a bit at the aftermath of Beowulf's death? The modernisms in the Hidley translation were bothering me when I was reading it through the first time, but I think I managed to incorporate them smoothly enough the second time. Now, I bet everyone noticed that I definitely was screwing up more in the second half than the first half. But boy, oh boy, was that climax and ending sucking me in so hard that I'm sure I didn't even notice 30% of the mistakes I'm making. Poetry. Poetry is the cataclysmic destruction of all other previously established forms of communication. And when Beowulf was being written, Old English was turning into Middle English that will turn into Modern English. The magic and monsters and mythical auguries of the pagan world was turning into the moribund, morbid, death-fascinating, somewhat more solitary world of the Christian worldview. And I also had lost a very important connection that I wish I put in the intro to Skyrim, because holy cow, deciding to put the Skyrim music on for the dragon fight was not planned. That came to me halfway through reading the words that would be a good idea to do, and I was blown away. I was absolutely blown away. Oh my gosh. Yeah, don't use the word mistake. No one's thinking of it. You know what? Let's do that again. Let's scroll back up to the dragon fight and get that going, cause the adrenaline, the poetry manages to like very directly engage with your central nervous system, I think in a stronger way than prose, once you learn the psychological trickery going on behind it, and how the words and some sort of struggle to say them, which is why poetry is a cataclysmic collapse of linguistic prose. You're kind of supposed to fight it. It's supposed to look weird, and at some points in these fight scenes, you're slurring your breath and sloshing it around, and the words don't come out right. But you're moving parts of your face that might be getting stabbed and sliced up by the characters fighting each other, and there really is an adrenaline rush there that does actually feel like a video game. And for a good 5 minutes or so during the dragon fight, I did rewind it, look at it again. I'll do it again. I was having so much fun getting sucked in and immersed in that in particular. Oh yes, here it is. This is when it hit me. Okay, this is in the intro. I was talking about connections with Tolkien, right? But really, I think it's more. It really is maybe living on stronger nowadays when kids are playing Skyrim. The scene where he dives underwater and then comes back out into Grendel's mother's lair struck me as awfully video gamey. His men fighting back minor monsters on the way to the boss's lair struck me as especially video gamey. But with this line here, he worked his wrath into a roar. Let's do that again. That was fun. Like increased heart rate, not dopamine, this is like adrenaline or something. There really is like an engagement with your central nervous system that is as visceral and immediate as getting sucked in and immersed in any good video game. But yeah, Skyrim may be more. Playing Skyrim nowadays might be a closer link to the Beowulf tradition than is Lord of the Rings. Granted, I saw a lot of Lord of the Rings in there. I saw more of Skyrim in there. Here we go. Let's do this again. That was amazing. That was incredible. What a rush. Another thing that really hit me is that the song, how the defining theme of Skyrim is the Song of the Dovahkiin. It's only 3 minutes long, but it is very much meant to evoke the popular imagination of how a Beowulf-style song would have been chanted as a chorus of many manly men singing together in a mead hall or something. What's going on with my... Oh. A bit of lag on the input connection, or latency on my internet connection. Hey, Steady Pace, check this out. There, a stone arch, and there a stream rushing from the barrow's entry. A boiling geyser, furious fumes and flames. No one could live long in there, not without burning. Beowulf knew he couldn't fight inside the horde lair. The dragon's heat was horrific. He worked his wrath into a roar. The main man of the Vadergates blowled. The main man of the Vadergates bellowed into the blast zone, calling forth his foe. Under the stone, warmth turned to war. An echoed challenge bounced, and the dozing dragon lifted her head, alert with fury. A human voice. There'd be no negotiation, no settlement in metal. Fire walked first, dragon's breath surging out of the stones. Earth quaked as she rose and roared in return. The challenging mortal raised his shield as she emerged, a whipping wrath, a coil convulsing overhead, fangs, claws, and scales railing against robbery. Ready for war. Beowulf's sword was already drawn, that razor edge, that razing heirloom. Each of them living was intolerable to the other, and in fury they fell to it. Feet planted, the people's provider held firm behind his shield, even as the serpent twirled, twisting and unfurling, her scales flames swathed. Rah! Flinging herself hard at fate, a flexing firework aimed straight at the king. His shield shirked its duty, keeping him safe only for moments. The famous warrior was, for the first time, naked. Another first. Beowulf had never before been quarry, God snubbed, fate forsaken, his glorious premeditated victory unwritten. The great lord raised a sooty fist and punched in panic at armored scales as his sword slid, twisting against stony bones, his fang useless against volcanic daggers. I noticed I made the mistake the first time, but I powered through it because the word daggers actually kind of sort of fits anyway, and when you do poetry, you get in the zone, and sometimes it's hard to follow the words one at a time with how they're laid out to keep you guessing a little bit about the next twist in the line below. It dawned on the king that he was afraid. His weapons... So yeah, I see dangers, but kind of in my peripheral vision, the line ahead, and my brain photoshops it into daggers, and then when my central vision hits the word dangers, a little subconscious voice like, oh no, but it's okay, power through it, keep going. It dawned on the king that he was afraid, his weapons forged without sorcery. His defenses were all man-made. The horde gored rippled in rage, her mouth a fusillade of flames. So furious was she to feel even the dullest blade. War lanterns lit, Beowulf knew better than to expect victory. His sword unmatched until this hour, splintered where it should have slain. His ageless iron had never been conquered, but now Ecgtheow's son found himself engaged in ebbing, loaded into a rattling cart and exiled into a darker country, no one willing to go easy in the loss of long-held lodging. Everybody's got to learn sometime. Back at it again, the two battled furiously, the dragon renewed, rapturous and hailing, uncoiling afresh. The man who'd been king was wreathed in flame. He knew his end was near. No one was coming, no seconds running to serve or save him. No ringed raised warriors, those men that former family were sprinting from his screams, racing for safety, off the barrow and into the trees. Woo! Boomba, boomba. All right, I want to try another experiment. Let's see. So for those of you who have joined me for this whole time, I hope it has finally clicked now. The thing that's driven me crazy for 2 years now. You have to like hit a beat and get yourself immersed into a rhythm that comes at you at a pretty fast speed. My gamer brain does visualize something kind of like a Guitar Hero timeline that gets me focusing on little visual elements that are split up into tiny little frame time lengths of intervals of emotional beats. And when you nail those emotional beats and get an image in your head that really synchronizes with the words coming out of your mouth, all of a sudden a flow state activates that is awfully video gamey. It's incredible, and you have to speak out loud for that to work. You have, and when you get good at it, when you get good at poetry, later on you're allowed to lip the words silently. But some dramatic mouth movements are required, is the point. To get you in sync with characters. Another thing you guys might have noticed, I was sweating and panning and huffing and puffing in sync with the kind of sort of tension and excitement of the story. That's another video game thingy that ancient epic poetry was doing, having a shared player character, listener character singer character experience, where when you sing this stuff, you end up feeling similar physiological sensations to what was being evoked by the exciting adventures of the story. Getting good at poetry. Is Beowulf the Dark Souls of poems? I don't know, but Ulysses absolutely is the Dark Souls of literature and does similar things in more wilder ways that are absolutely boiling my brain these days with how much magic is going on here in literature. But anyways, Skyrim's soundtrack might have a really fun... And the fact that, like, video games don't... Okay, have you guys ever noticed how the video games that you know and love so well suddenly feel very different when you turn the music off? As if the music is some kind of intrinsic part of that millisecond to millisecond, frame-by-frame emotional beat that plugs your brain into the rhythm of the gameplay and really gets you immersed and activates a flow state. A lot of times when you play the game for a good long while and turn the music off, the magic breaks. There is a sort of rhythmic baseline pacing to the human brain going through a story or experiencing entertainment that has not changed. And that's absolutely incredible. And I felt the magic with this Beowulf stuff, interfacing with Skyrim stuff in such a strong way during that reading that I'm really, really excited with the crazy historical grand narratives flowing through my head and how I have hopefully it keeps happening again and again, but I feel like this is still yet another clearer example of what I can't stop thinking about anymore. But anyways, let's find some combat music and read Grendel's fight scene to or just, I don't know, some tracks here might just flat out be straight up appropriate. When they were, when they were riding across the countryside and wandering into the swamp, I was thinking of the hiking you do in an Elder Scrolls game, Yeah. Okay, let's see what happens in our brains when I sync up some quiet Elder Scrolls hiking music to a quiet Beowulf hiking scene. So let's see. What was a word that I remember from this segment? Oh, I think I'm actually right here. Yeah, let's go on a hike. The descendants of the chieftains rode over razor-edged rocks. I just saw a horizon crest, a hill crest over with a horizon on the other top as the music crescendos. Why is that? Do I have free will? Was that a choice I made? I don't know. It just kind of activated. The descendants of chieftains rode over razor-edged rocks, through perilous passageways, places off map. Paths too slender for company, where sea monsters sang and cliffs called for suicides. Hrothgar took the front, his crew behind him, examining her tracks, unhappily imagining the path ahead. And finally the trees leaned longingly toward the stones, their needles bending as if to break, a grove of ghosts. There was the mare, water welling up, like something wound wrung, red as blood. Though they'd known their man was dead, they suffered afresh to discover in the mare a dark gift. There at cliff's edge lay a scare's head. Oh, God! You see how you, like, naturally get into a rhythm that kind of sort of matches the... Oh! I am delighted with the rush of encountering timeless literary books. I'm gonna transition us back to our intro graphic. Whew. And try and catch up with everything I missed that whole time. Let's see what chat had to say at the very beginning of chat. Did you already do a dramatic reading of Grendel, the 70s book? Maybe you did, or maybe you've absolutely been Mandela Dashvark. What if I don't like Bud Light? That's fine. Can't wait to finally learn about the stuff Tolkien wrote fanfics about. I feel like I learned more about the hit Bethesda 2011 game Skyrim than I did about... Yeah, I feel like I learned more about the inspirations behind Skyrim in particular than I did Tolkien, which is so ironic because, The Elder Scrolls is inspired by Tolkien, so it's like a concentric spiral of the stories going back to their sources again. Right. Lord of the Rings was popular in the 60s and 70s. That inspired Dungeons & Dragons in the 70s, which inspired the Elder Scrolls in the 90s. They worked their way through Tolkien tropes until maybe there's like kind of an initiative around the 2010s to maybe take a deeper look at the source material of the Tolkien they were inspired by, and then maybe try to hone a Beowulf-like atmosphere after that point. Either way, a lot of new interesting video ideas definitely were shooting through my head doing that. Oh shit, remember the movie? Oh, I gotta watch the 2007 movie now. I didn't want to watch sexy Angelina Jolie as the Grendel mother movie until after doing a fresh reread again. And now I'm ready. I'm prepared. There's no way it's gonna be that good. Whew, what's the significance of rings? It seems like they were almost sort of a stand-in for coins, or like a fancier version of coins. Yeah, the money economy, the way it worked wasn't really fully explained, and so I'm deferring to some assumptions that one would make in Homer, where a standardized set of currency doesn't really exist. And so in Homer, when they're talking about bargaining things on value, they'll say like 20 pieces of gold, and in Beowulf it sounds like what they say is 20 rings of gold. So it sounds like rings may be a standard sort of measurement, a proto-coin sort of situation. It doesn't seem as significant as they are in Tolkien, for sure. There is a a fascination with the rings, but not necessarily a fetishization or an empowering of the rings. The rings don't have magic power. They're just worth stuff. They're part of the treasure hold, and the wealth that legitimizes the authority of the kings. Whew. Beowulf's gonna have an epic gamer moment. Should I should probably name this project or something like that. Beowulf's epic gamer moment. Oh, that was awesome. Oh yeah, and there's so many good lines. War was the wife Hrothgar wedded first. Is the oldest written version of this Latin Greek? No, come on, Ron Cinephile. You should know better. It's Old English, which I think is actually synonymous historically with the Saxon language. I mean, there might have been an echo of Homeric inspirations for bardic traditions going over, but the bard is not necessarily that never would have been written. I mean, maybe Latin, but not Greek. Yeah, it might be written in Latin, but not because it has anything to do with Rome, but because it would have had something to do with the Christian medieval scribes who were writing down the currently surviving codex of Beowulf from the Middle Ages, year 1000. But the thing is that it's not written in Latin. There might have been reproductions of that, or translations into it in Latin at some point along the chain, but I do believe the original was Old English, and that is also why it is historically important to the evolution of the English language. It doesn't even feel like English, which is why it still requires translations. It is closer to German. Das was ein gut King. Let's skim through a bit of a performance that I watched to get myself ready. And it's a guy who's apparently pretty famous for doing this, named Benjamin Bagby. It's a different method than the medieval one. He does it through, what should I... verbatim memorization rather than improvised memorization. Before mass literacy, the way long-form oral storytelling recitation worked was more like the bards had the story remembered in chunks of paragraphs at a time, rather than the whole thing remembered at the time. But with Bagby here, oh, you can hear that now.
Lofta dem själen mig för jag var en man, jag feon.
Someday I'm gonna have to learn to play the harp. If I keep going down this road, I absolutely will have to learn how to play a portable, easy, ancient stringed instrument. One that definitely won't take any mental energy away from the words too. Oh, I just got an idea. Okay, hang on. Actually, scratch that. Let's pause Benjamin Bagby, bring him to the beginning. I'm wondering how this is gonna sound. If you want a lesson on how far the actual English language has come, let me hit you guys with some degree of the thing I love doing so much on Metal Gear Mondays. Synchronicity. Oh, this is gonna be grand. Okay. Let me get a window capture of the translated text upon the screen. Oh no. Why is the window capture screwing up? Yeah, excuse me one moment with the technical difficulty stuff. I'm going to hit us with a very, very fun idea once I finally get this window capture business squared away. Let's just make a whole new window capture for the PDF. There we go. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. Noop, 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 noop. Noop, 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 noop. Oh, brother, where is Bagby? Okay, what am I even... Man, this is inelegant. Da, da, da. Close enough. Bro!
Wake up,
Tell
then,
me we
ye
still know
bubble
how
filling
to
a
speak
room
of
you
old
know.
kings.
Who
In the old
the
days,
ringas
everyone knew
held
what
and
men
forever.
were.
Off.
Brave,
Shirche,
old, glory
Sierra
bound.
Fett, Moniga Milo,
Only
Melo
stories
Set
now,
Yo,
but I'll
Dear.
sound the Speardane
Hey,
song,
Sorry,
hoarded for
Elves.
hungry times. Okay, no, it's already desynced. He's doing an abridged version that's an hour and a half long. Often Skald took mead benches. Yeah, the full translated text has a couple extra lines. He's skipping around. The first father was a foundling, Skjald Skeffing. He spent his youth fists up, browbeating every barstool brother, bonfiring his enemies. That man began in the waves, a baby in a basket. But he bootstrapped his way into a kingdom, trading loneliness for luxury. Yeah, see how many more lines there are? Okay, he has an hour and a half version memorized. The full text takes about 4 hours. Problem is, the modern mind, I'm having fun giving it a shot. I've read at least one of these lectures at some point say that the modern mind is actually incapable of memorizing stories that long in the same way, because a kid growing up on books is not going to have their mental quick reference dictionary be big block paragraphs that all sound like audio instead of like written words on a page. Anyways, that was good cairning. And later, God sent a Skjald's son, a wolf cub. Oh, did you hear how close that was, though? Let's see, what was that? God sent a Skjald a son. And what's he saying? Oh, yeah. Also another fun fact. The one word between Old English that's still current in modern English is God. And, I don't think the German Gut has really gone too far off the realms of where English landed up either.
God send the folk to Frog.
God send the Frukket the Froger or something is apparently pretty darn close to God sent to comfort the people. Yeah, Old English is funny like that. Sometimes it sounds straight up German, sometimes it sounds straight up nonsense, sometimes there's a hint of the modern English sliding through, but real hint. Got level 20 bard up in this bit. Okay, so the Benjamin Bagme idea, I don't think works. The Skyrim soundtrack idea, on the other hand, I think works so remarkably well that I kind of want to email Bethesda after this stream and if we can strike a deal. Anyways, let's get to that. I want to try one more Skyrim soundtrack reading after the failure of our Benjamin Bagme reading, but the Skyrim soundtrack has worked remarkably well in 2 cases so far, and that's the dragon fight and the dragon fight hiking when they were hiking over the mountains and the violin sort of rose to a crescendo. The idea of hiking through the mountains and a violin rising, sort of the word rising plus mountain plus hiking plus moving, triggered a vision. I did not have to think a single word to get a beautiful, gorgeous vision of the scene. It really is incredible sometimes when you get this stuff synced up. Whew. I wanna see if I can find one that fits with the Grendel mother fight scene. Because it turns out the Grendel fight scene isn't quite as theatric as I was expecting. Beowulf has his stealth skills maxed out, so the fight doesn't look very exciting. He just kind of plays dead and then hits Grendel when his back is turned. This one I don't think is grisly enough. What about Tooth and Claw? Isn't there some kind of dragon priest music that's a little more intense? If I recall, I think I remember many bosses and such having their own theme. Nope. Okay, what about the dragon fight music? Oh, yeah, nope, this is it. Let's do this one. Ugh. I think I feel an extra big lump in my throat now that wasn't there before when I go. When I wake up in the morning, I'm going to be able to, like, stretch a new muscle somewhere in there that I wouldn't have been able to before. Great vocal practice, too. Incredible vocal practice, some of the best you can get. To keep things from getting too quiet and boring, let me just put the ambiance back on as I find the fight scene. I remember her chamber? Her hall. Yeah, okay. I worry that the music may be looping at an inconvenient spot. The Gayat was ready to rumble, pissed off now. He roared a challenge, warmed for war with Grendel's mother, twisting her hair around his fist, raging, swinging her by her own skein, flinging her to crash against the kingdom she'd reigned over. She rose again, relentless, and turned on him, gripping and flipping him. The pugilist panicked. His certainty crumbling, he took flight and fell. He began, sick-hearted, to hear his death knell, his sure feet fumbling, his fight spirit fugitive. She bent over his breast, held the hall invader hard to the stones, and drew a long knife. The mare wife meant to avenge her son, her sole heir, but Beowulf's mail shielded him. His shoulder safe in the scarelight of some smith's genius, link staying locked to bend her blade. Ecgtheow's hair would have been filleted, recategorized as MIA, and left to rot in her cavern, had not his suit saved him. And that too was God's work. The Lord, maker of miracles, sky designer, had no trouble leveling the playing field when Beowulf beat the Count and stood. He glimpsed it hanging in her hoard, that armory of heirlooms, somebody's birthright. A sword blessed by blood and flood, ancient, dating from the dawn of things. So tremendous only a hero could heft it, though all would envy it. Beowulf gripped the giant sword at the hilt, and then he, the Scyldings' main man, in desperation, not expecting to exist after this night, swung it at his enemy with all his might. And it was enough. He cleaved her spine. The bone rings given by God were bitten through, the house of her head raided. As her hall had been, she bent as though praying and was spent, seeking to the stones. The sword sweated red, and the swordsman regretted nothing. Oh, yes! I suppose it also helps if you've heard the song loop over and over again for several tens of times in your distant memory. But that worked. That worked really well. Holy cow, does Skyrim motifs in general work ridiculously well with this thing. Woohoo! Oh, yeah. I'm gonna have to say goodbye at some point, right? This is always the hardest part, but, if, of course, 8 people are watching on Twitch, but one thing that's, good about this streaming schedule I got up is the VOD is gonna come up on YouTube later on. But for those of you who are watching now, I once again want to remind you of some scenes in Homer that I was a little inspired by for a little bit going on in the heat of the moment there, of a bard in an ancient poem and some in-universe fourth-wall-breaking joke tapping a tip jar at the foot underneath his harp on his knee or something like that. The financial fiasco of the now is that I'm going to have to take Eddie to the vet for the weekend. The weather in Atlanta has been ridiculously stormy for a full week now, and Eddie has really bad storm anxiety. And for the past week, he's spent every day being pretty afraid, hiding in closets, shivering, trying to bury himself under my lap, and it's gone on all these rainy days have just kept going on and on and on, and I'm seeing on the weather schedule that there is a whole nother rainy week scheduled for next week. Yeah, I kind of want to take him to the vet and get this problem fixed, because it's manifesting into some physical symptoms and destructive behavior that I don't like thinking about because it causes me anxiety, and I was worried I would be too anxious to perform well tonight because of this problem. But yes, if you are watching this on YouTube later on and follow the links to my Twitch profile, you'll find the donation button. If you found yourself so emotionally stirred and immersed and inspired by this classic performance, this neoclassical performance of classical ancient epic poetry, please feel free to support your favorite YouTubers and Twitch streamers and toss the bard a coin in the tip jar. I really appreciate the fact that I get these opportunities at all. You can still tell that I'm like pretty high on life right now from doing this stuff, even though the poverty is an issue. But yeah, I've toured 2 assisted living facilities in Atlanta for Mom. Anyways, no, just a reminder, I got shocked into the streaming schedule from financial poverty, and now a thing with Eddie's coming up. And I bet it's going to be cheap. It's probably a very minor thing that's going to go away when the weather gets better, and they'll charge me only $50 or something for a gadget or a pill or something. But I did some scary Googling about these symptoms he's getting, and they sound pretty scary, and I'm worried that it might cost more than that. But anyways, yeah. That is me reminding the people watching this on YouTube later on that they're allowed to donate to if they want. I really need it, but I appreciate it, and we'll have more coming along later on. This was a lot of fun. I had a blast, but what else kind of hits this time schedule? I should do another Gilgamesh, right? Maybe one that's not a concert. Oh, and other Norse mythologies too, for sure. Yeah, come to think of it, I do have quite a lot of Scandinavian fans who like laughing and giggling, who get a kick or something out of the Eddas and the epics, and maybe there's one that might work good as a Twitch stream, spoken dramatically to video game music during appropriate parts. The video game music thing, that's interesting. It came to me in the middle of this one, but maybe next time I'll definitely know how to prepare a real crazy... Yeah, maybe next time I now know that I will have something to gain from picking a few famous video game tracks. I want to see George recite Shakespeare. Okay. You got it. You got it, Chief. That's how I'll play us out. Beautiful. Thanks for the idea, because there is one that I actually know. This is a poem that you have to look at for a very long time for it to make sense. And once you do, it might hit you in ways that are hard to describe, because that is the point. Also, as important as the spoken word is, some kind of mental association with the squiggly lines is of the actual character of the symbol of text, is also important to be considering as well. What sort of hard to describe subconscious feelings the squiggly lines of the words on the page might get you. Let the low. Let the bird of loudest lay on the sole Arabian tray. Herald sad and trumpet be to those who... Ooh. I've still got this adrenaline rush going on that's throwing me my synchronicity off the pace. Let the bird of loudest lay on the sole Arabian tray. Herald sad and trumpet be to whose sound chaste wings obey. But thou shrieking harbinger, foul procure of the fiend, augur of the fever's end, to this troop come thou not near. From this session interdict every fowl of tyrant wing, save the eagle, feathered king, keep the obsque so strict. Let the priest in surplice white, the defunctive music can, be the death-divining swan, lest the requiem lack his right. And thou treble-dated crow, that thy sable gender mixed, with the breath thou givest and takest, mongst our mourners shalt go. Here the anthem doth commence, love and constancy is dead, phoenix and the turtle fled, and a mutual flame from hence. So they loved as love in twain, had the essence but in one, two distincts division none. Number there in love was slain. Hearts remote yet not asunder, distance and no space was seen, twixt this turtle and his queen, but in them it were a wonder. So between them love did shine, that the turtle saw his right, flaming in the phoenix's sight, either was the other's mine. Property was thus appalled, that the self was not the same, single nature's double name, neither two nor one was called. Reason in itself confounded, that division grew together, to themselves yet either neither. simple were so well compounded, that it cried, how true a twain seemeth this concordant one. Love has reason, reason none, if what parts can so remain. Whereupon it made this twain, the phoenix and the dove, co-supremes in stars of love, and chorus to their tragic scene. Thranos, beauty, truth, and rarity, grace in all simplicity, here enclosed in cinders lie. Death is now the phoenix's nest, and the turtle's loyal breast to eternity doth rest, leaving no posterity. 'Twas not their infirmity, it was married chastity. Truth may seem but cannot be, beauty brag but 'tis not she. Truth and beauty buried be, to this urn let those repair that are either true or fair, for these dead birds sigh a prayer.